Good morning, everyone. So they have everything, please. You can go ahead and finally get settled in. We will begin shortly. As a reminder, you can use silence. So yeah, go ahead and silence your electronic devices. That'd be wonderful. Just go ahead and get it started in about a minute. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. If you are able, I ask that you please stand to go ahead. Let's go ahead and do the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I will just go ahead and do it. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which is advanced, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. To our esteemed guests, families present here, and those joining us through our live stream, a warm and respectful good morning. On behalf of the Department of Defense, welcome to the 2024 Billings Family Member Update hosted by Defense POW MIA Chapter. My name is Mark Alway, and I'm the Director of Outreach Communications and Local Government. Today, we're going to have the privilege of hearing from speakers who provide invaluable insights and updates on the ongoing efforts to locate, identify, and bring home your loved ones lost during the Vietnam War, Korean War, and World War II. We have government personnel, and we're going to all these briefings here. We're going to run down to the agenda. And through their efforts, we're going to answer your questions, and we're going to meet with you to discuss your loved one's case. Now, in this room today, as you see all before you, we've got nearly 90 family members here representing nearly 40 unaccounted for personnel cases and your loved ones. So whether they're a soldier, sailor, airman, marine, you are here for them, and we are here for you. And today, out of those members that I just laid out, 30 of you family members are the first-time attendees to a family member update. So we welcome you all for this today as well. Now, at this time, if you are a military veteran or retiree, we invite you to please stand and allow us a moment to express our heartfelt gratitude for your courage and sacrifice for serving in the military. Thank you. And this time I'd like to introduce a special guest that we have in our audience from Representative Matt Rosendale's office, the second district here in Montana. We have Mr. Dwayne Nisset. Thank you, sir. And from U.S. Senator John Tester's office, we have Mr. Josiah himself. And we also, from U.S. Senator Steve Daines' office, we have Mr. Troy Polk, and he's not here. He should be here. And along with the staffers that are here today, from each representative and senator's office, they were kind enough to share a video from their congressional. And I'm going to go ahead and play each one.
And apparently, I do understand my thinking.
I'll try that one more time. Sorry about that.
Congressman Matt Rhodes down here. I recommend everyone's today's defense POW NIL town agency, family mental health. I do want to extend my deep condolences and gratitude for all of this. Supporting that. So we didn't get up and we listen. When a soldier goes to war, we're not the only ones. I know from the service, a father and brother, a soldier's entire family is in the lives of them. Shame for a loved one missing. Whether you're missing a parent, spouse, child, or a veteran, I'm praying that you find them and that they come back home safe. And for those of you who have a loved one who has been captured, I pray for the humane treatment and speedy return. I pray that this update provides everyone with meaningful information and that it strengthens, encourages, and gives you hope as you search for answers in a situation with no real patience. Take comfort in the fact that the Lord is with you, as Joshua chapter 1, verse 9 states. Be strong and courageous. Do not tremble or be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Please do not despair and beg that feelings I can about the situations families here today find themselves in. Just know that I'm always here standing at the ready if there's anything in my office that I can do to help. Never hesitate to reach out for assistance. Thank you for having me here today, and may God bless each and every one.
Hello, everyone. This is Senator John Dustin. Thank you to each of the panel members here today. I want you to know that the sacrifices of loved ones are never forgotten. And the sacrifices you continue to make on our behalf are never forgotten. We have never given up on our efforts to find the loved ones, and we will never give up on our service to bring them home, no matter how long that takes. Our nation is always dealing with that, and we can never repent. We'll keep working until every last one is missing is returned home.
Senator Steve Daines here, and thanks for the opportunity to share a few words with you all that the Department of Defense formed the families of those who were missing in our nation's past conflicts. As a son of a Montana United States Marine, I know that no one understands the sacrifice of men and women who beautiful, better than families waiting for them now. And I want to extend my deepest gratitude to you all and your loved ones for the bravery put on the line for the sake of our students. Montana has a rich legacy of service, but as you all know too well, we also have too many Montanans that have yet to return. I am thankful for the DPAA's diligence to bring these American heroes back to Montana. And as your voice in the U.S. Senate, know that I've always supported in this important mission. Because our nation owes you and your loved ones a debt that can never ever be repaid. So the least we can do is to never forget the sacrifices made on our behalf. May God continue to bless you, your families, and our great United States of America.
Let's go ahead and give it a round of applause. Right. By now, you should have met your respective military service casualty officer. They've been speaking with you, whether it's over the phone or sending you emails or even snail mail. So hopefully you got a chance to greet them and they brief you at the registration desk. And some of you may have one-on-one with the case analyst along with the service casualty officers. This is a great resource and conduit for you speaking with the government. So please make sure you be in contact with them sometime today if you haven't already. And they're going to give you the answers, and if you have the answer readily available, they'll make sure they know where to get. Now, let's take a moment to familiarize ourselves with the contents of your folder that you received from your schools and the registration desk. You'll see the handouts of all the briefings that will be presented to you today, shown on the big screen. And also, you should have a survey in there. So throughout the course of today, you can go ahead and fill out those surveys, and that'd be greatly appreciated. You can give us any type of feedback you want, especially on our agenda, on our speakers, and it really help improve what we're doing for you today. As part of all that, and throughout the day, I'll go ahead and remind you about those surveys. And towards the end, at the end of the eventually today, we'll go ahead and collect those surveys. And you should have, probably wasn't in your folder, but you should have on the table a copy of the agenda. I want to go ahead and follow along. It's also on the big screen here. So we'll run through the event this morning, this afternoon. As you see, your overview right now, and I'm going to shortly introduce our first speaker, our Deputy Director of Operations, Matt Friends. And after that, we're going to have our remembrance ceremony. And that's going to be your opportunity to share a little bit about your loved one and how comfortable you feel as far as sharing that story, as far as why you're here and why you're here for your loved one. And right after that, we'll go ahead into our field team briefing. And Captain Ryan, Sergeant Billings, and Miss Susan, and they're going to tell you a little bit about what they do in their life when they're out in the field of the career loved ones. And after a short break, that part, we'll go into a few other speakers. From Dr. Franklin David, who's going to talk a little bit about the recovery and ID process and what he and his team do out in the lab. We're going to hear from Dr. Shauna Marshall. She's representing the athletes, and she'll talk about the DNA processes and advances. Then we're going to go into a partnership brief from Mr. Justin Budd from our Partnerships and Innovation Director. And after that, before we break for lunch, we're going to break all those speakers from this morning, and they're going to be lined up, ready to receive any questions you may have. And they're going to answer them the best that we can. All right, then we'll go into the lunch session. Any questions about the morning sessions? No. I'll repeat this part about the breakout sessions right before we break for lunch. But just know that depending on your family and the loved one, the conflict they were involved in, you're going to be going to a specific breakout session right after you come back from lunch. But we'll go over this and we'll designate the specific rooms as far as the afternoon session. And after those afternoon sessions, we'll wrap it up, come back in this room. We'll go ahead and do one final Q&A session with all our speakers and also the speakers that were during breakout session. Then after that, we'll have closing remarks from Colonel Bennett and all in favor. How's that all sound? Okay. All right. Well, that's all I have for this morning for my part. Now it's my honor and privilege to introduce to you DPAA's Deputy Director of Operations, Colonel Matt Friends.
All right. Zipper 5 for King of Marines I've met out there. Hua, if you're Army, Aim High Air Force, and Navy, I think it's a Hua, right? I'm not sure. I should know since I'm in the Department of the Navy, but for those who serve, we really appreciate it. And for the family members that are here, really just honored to have you here. I'm in my third year at the agency.
My job is Deputy Director of Operations to oversee execution of the agency's worldwide mission, oversee our laboratories in Moffett and Hawaii, and really just day in and day out, make sure that we're being as effective and efficient as we can to maximize results, identify as many service areas we can, as quickly as we can. Because I know we've been waiting for decades, you've been waiting for decades in many cases, 8 decades in the case of World War II. So I know that that is a long time to wait, a long time to breathe, and a long time to wait for those answers. So I look forward to meeting each and every one of you here. I'm super excited to be at this FMU. It is an intimate affair. We normally have a lot more family members, but I'm glad in my first time ever in the state of Montana. So I'm super excited to be here. Really liked it. I was thinking about, retirement's coming soon. And when I got off the plane, I'm like, oh man, I could see myself living here. But probably when I come back in January, I might have to say, being in Hawaii, gotten soft, it comes to cold weather. So we really do view this mission as a sacred obligation of all areas. It is not hyperbole for the men and women that work at this agency. I can say in 26 years of service, this has been one of the most noble, honorable missions that I've been a part of. I have a hard time summoning the words of how much it means to me as a service member to give back to these men and women, or these men and women who paid the last full measure of devotion to service their country. So we're really just excited to be here today. Look forward to talking with you. Look forward to the updates you'll get from family members, and we will continue. I'm going to start off here with a video, kind of get some overview of the agency and what we do, and then I'll dive in a little bit and talk about the nature of this global and generational and scope vision.
We write no last chapter. We close no books. We put away no final limits. And in the Americans in backward and yet man cannot come before we achieve the first possible country of those missing in action. Why keep searching? The answer is simple. You never leave the fallen Americans behind. The mission of the Defense POW Agency, or DPAA, is to provide the fullest possible accounting for our missing personnel to their families and their nation. Strategically located in Arlington, Virginia, with major facilities at Joint Base Pearl Harbor and Hawaii, and Offutt Air Force Base, Nebraska, the more than 600-person newly established defense agency is jointly manned by soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, and Department of Defense civilians with specialized skills. Researching, recovering, identifying, and ultimately returning an individual to their family begins with analysis and investigation. The DPAA experts begin the search by studying all known information regarding the circumstances of each loss. Historians and analysts gather information from U.S. veterans, foreign witnesses, archival records, and other sources. They then create a case file for each unaccounted for American. This file may include historical records, official correspondence, maps, photographs, daily activity logs, and medical and personnel records of the missing person. These files are continually updated until an identification is made.
Once the research is done here, advance approval, we send out small teams, there are 2 people, there be a 10-person team, conducting interviews at a village's house, at a district office, or a combination of their, went to the site first, and then conducting the interviews on site.
Once all available information is analyzed, a decision can be made to disinter individuals buried as unknown or conduct field investigation. During a typical investigation mission, personnel interview potential witnesses, conduct on-site reconnaissance, and survey terrain for safety and logistical concerns. Teams also try to generate new leads that may result in future recovery. The main goal of the investigation is to obtain enough information to correlate or connect a particular site with one or more missing Americans. If enough on-site evidence is found, the site will be recommended for recovery and excavation. Recovery sites range in size from a few square meters, such as in individual bearings, to areas larger than football fields for aircraft crashes. DPAA may hire as many as 100 local workers to help with the excavation process.
This job has so many benefits. And me personally, it's an opportunity to serve the country, but also our fighting forces and kind of contribute to that as well. So definitely, it's just an incredible challenge to work in all the countries where we want to travel these amazing sites, work with the local villagers, local officials, and just have the opportunity to give somebody some answers after decades of waiting to know what happened to their loved one, and maybe just expressing the grief that lack of information and lack of answers brings. We have a chance to resolve that for them, and that's just an incredible opportunity.
Investigative and recovery missions in search of missing Americans take DPAA personnel to distant, remote, and often dangerous locations all over the globe. Rice paddies in Southeast Asia, areas on the Korean Peninsula, 16,000-foot mountaintops in the Himalayas, and underwater sites off the coast of Papua New Guinea. And we still continue to search the battlefields of World War II throughout Europe. After a successful recovery, all evidence has been transported to the DPAA laboratory. Once they've arrived in the lab, the painstaking process of identification begins. This is the final step of the mission, leading to the return of an individual. In many of the cases, an important step in the identification process is DNA analysis, which is accomplished by cutting a bone sample that is sent to the Armed Forces DNA Identification Laboratory. One of the challenges DPAA faces today is the lack of reference samples and family members of those still unaccounted for. Any person who is a relative of an unaccounted for American is encouraged to contact their service casualty office to ensure there's a DNA reference sample on file for that service member. DPAA makes an identification when all available evidence remains. Artifacts and historical documents point to the same person. The ID process can take anywhere from a few months to several years to complete. Any unresolved cases are kept open with the hope that new evidence will be found, or new technologies will be developed to make a future identification possible. Once an American has been identified, there remains a return to their family through the respective service casualty office. They'll return home with full military honors and given the respect they earn through their service and sacrifice for their country.
Oh, a family member of this agency, to me, is very unbelievable. And again, very personal. Because when somebody loses somebody like a firefighter, and you really don't know that the story for 70 years, and then you find the agency that knows about him and keeps his memory of mine, keeps a mission of mine, it's hard to find. It's very because it means you're not just doing this yourself alone. You have a whole lot of people who are concerned about finding that and bringing it home. That says something about how we bother of death, particularly those who serve this nation. I'm very grateful to all of the community since don't turn down as they pursue this longevity. And for our citizens, because they think it's an important enough mission that we can really value life. And those two nations, very few times I think another mission for this country does this. But you know,
don't want to be around. I don't really put everybody on it. Please help me. Please help me. I couldn't believe it. I don't want to get in touch with them. You're fine. But I'm very grateful. I'm glad I live in the United States of America. And that we have the attitude. Please remember, we're so fortunate. I want you to know, and I learned from my own experience, that if something happens to you, we will be looking for you.
The men and women of the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency are united in their effort to recover and return as many of our missing personnel as possible. One more patriot return, one more family that now has answers. One more step in fulfilling our nation's promise.
All right. Okay. I hate following that video for 2 reasons. I think I've seen it like 400 times, and it gets me every time. And then 2, now you gotta listen to my voice after listening to Kevin Costner and narrating that. So I apologize that I don't sound like Kevin Costner, but you know, you're stuck with this voice that God gave me. So really just excited to be here. I'm just gonna talk a little bit about the mission, you know, the scope of the mission and some of the ways we get after the mission and the challenges that we face. So you see the number, right? Over 81,000 missing service members. And we think we can account for 38,830, I should say, we think 38,830 months covered. So the difference in that number really is deep water losses are just beyond our current technology capabilities to get after. Some of the other challenges we have is, you know, what I refer to as small scope losses. So these are losses that we just don't have any information on the loss. There's not a lot of information. An example would be maybe in the Cold War, you really see that number of 128, 15, I believe 126, 15. We have, we believe would be recoverable. A lot of those were highly classified missions, and the aircraft may have taken off, never turned anything on, and never made it to their target location. So you have an entire swath of the Indo-Pacific theater, right, to try to search, and you just don't have details on it. So that's where really that number comes from, that large number down to the 38,000. World War II was added to our statutory requirement in 2010. We worked those cases historically throughout the agency's history, but really are working proactively to develop our World War II cases and get out in the field to cover those. The Vietnam War is currently an operational priority. So our operational priority right now is Vietnam War and then large-scale disinterment projects. An example of a large-scale disinterment project would be like the USS Oklahoma, where a 5-year project we closed out in 2022. I believe it was in 2022. They get that right. I think so. You guys do not. It's okay. I don't mind being corrected. I tell my staff when I say something wrong to jump in. So when we identified 364 of the 382 sailors of USS Oklahoma. That's an example of a large-scale disinterment project. This mission was really born out of the Vietnam War. Family members of POWs, post Vietnam War, went to Congress and went to the Paris Peace Accord and really advocated for the government to take on the responsibility to recover our POWs, to recover our MIAs, bring them back home. And we've been doing that and operating in Southeast Asia for over 35 years. Our laboratory actually dates its entry back to 1947 with the Central Identification Laboratory in Thailand post-World War II, had that large effort to recover our service members from the battlefields in place. The Korean War, over 7,000 missing, we believe 5,000, sorry, 7,000 of those recoverable. My challenge in the Korean War is we believe 5,000 of those missing are in North Korea. So you can imagine the access challenge that we have there. We work tirelessly. We continue to engage at the highest levels of government, but our last communication with North Korea was 2019. Our last, significant turnover from the, North Koreans in 2018. They turned over 55 boxes, total over 55 boxes with 55 individuals. Those boxes had over 500 phones in them, and they yielded 250 unique DNA seeds. So a minimum number of 250 was 55 boxes. To date, we have identified 89 U.S. service members from those boxes, and we have repatriated over 70 South Koreans back to South Korea to follow alongside us there. So those are some of the challenges we have. And then we have 6 missing from the Iraq and other conflicts. So the first Gulf War in the 90s. I say that to our younger service members, but they don't know. They think, right? We since after 9/11, we spent 20 years, and they think that's the Gulf War. Like, no, there was one before that in the 90s. So explain that. 45 nations that we operate in, and really what gives us access to those countries. We would like for it to be 46 someday, North Korea. I'll go back to Korean War. The other thing that we have going with Korean War is the Korean War Identification Project. There were over 800 unknowns buried in the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific in Hawaii. We are in phase 5 of the 7-phase project. This is for all of those unknowns. So that's the other way that we're working in the Korean War. You'll get some more deep dive into that as we go. So what gives us access to those countries really is the humanitarian nature of the mission. While we are a Department of Defense agency, our sole purpose in life is to recover our mission service members for greater harm. So a lot of the countries we work in and work with understand that and continue to work with us to provide access. At the level that I work, it's making sure that we're working with a transit policy, making sure we maintain access to these countries, that we're working to gain access to the countries that we need to gain access to, and then we just continue to work through that. Then you have the challenge. I say the backbone of what this agency does is historical research and analysis. Before we can even send one of those investigation teams to the field, or the recovery team that we talked about in the video, we got to have a solid foundation of that historical research and analysis. And I think a part of this agency, what it does, is what we do in the laboratory, we do scientific analysis process, or to make an identification. As you can imagine, domestically, especially for family members, emotionally are tied into this situation, mission. So we really work hard. And while we do these family members updates, because you are our customer, you're the reason that we exist. We're here providing answers. So veterans organizations, I think we have PSW rep. I don't know. He may have bailed out, but we went to visit them yesterday. Right, they have an interest in this. They follow alongside some of these service representatives. And of course, Congress, thank for our congressional representatives that are here. Staff, they have an interest in making sure that this money allocated to the Department of Defense is being used effectively. So I'll just kind of go over our missions. So FY, that fiscal year. So our fiscal year starts in October. This is what we're doing this fiscal year throughout the world. I'll highlight a couple of things. China, we had our first mission in China in over a decade. One of our planning policy directors, Mike Wilson, in the back there, just returned from a team with the team in China working, and we're going to be going back later this year to do another mission there. China is the one country where I have losses from all 3 major conflicts that we work. So it's an important place for us to get access to, and we're really this year making some solid headway in doing that. The numbers that you can see in the upper left of the screen of 50 ITs, those are the investigation teams, and 53 RTs, those are recovery teams. We also have a unique statutory authority to engage in public-private partnerships, and you'll hear from one of our partner and innovation directorate members later. But that really is a force multiplier for us. It provides they provide everything from historical research and analysis all the way to sending teams to the field. You see there's 21 investigation and 40 recovery sports this year. So that really is a force multiplier for us as we have a field. The other thing I want to highlight with these numbers is that we just received after the budget was passed close to a $50 million increase in our maintenance budget. So we're sitting at about $150 million for the last 5 years up until this year. So we're right now sitting just under $200 million, and next year we'll be just over that. What that translates into is about $30 million increase in my operation budget. So those numbers that you see there represent a 300% increase in the number of missions that are able to deploy to the field as compared to the last few years. So really the effort, again, getting on board my critical priority. So a lot of that money is going to that effort, but it's opened us up to allow us to do more with the Korean War and World War II as well. It's an amazing mission to be a part of, get to go to some amazing places and be a part of. And then the middle column there, you see the Germans. We also have teams to go out to American battle monument cemeteries throughout the world and do disinterments, and then also at the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific in Hawaii. We're doing those regularly, bring back those unknowns, bring to our laboratory and pocket our Hawaii to work at education. And I just want to kind of highlight, like for me, like one thing that impresses me most about this agency is that the men and women, you know, while we're working with human remains laboratory, we don't see the remains. We see people, with families, histories, and a story, and ultimately to bring that back and to be able to return a service member to their loved one. I mean, that is really what this mission is all about. Keep the promise to never leave a service member behind. So this is Colonel Ernest DeSoto. He was shot down, killed in action in 1969, along with Captain Frederick Hall, his navigator. One of the cool things about this mission, I think, shows the relationship that we have with the Vietnamese is during COVID, we did not really take the shield. The Vietnamese actually did 13 missions, unilateral missions, on our behalf. And Colonel DeSoto remained covered by one of the Vietnamese teams. They were both identified in 23, and then both were buried in the ceremony. See, Colonel DeSoto's wife, Joyce, 90 years old, and their 3 children attended his funeral in San Francisco. And then Captain Hall was buried in Green Hill Cemetery in 2023, and his wife Julia attended. Here's just another example from World War II. This is sorry, the name that should be Commander Frederick Schrader at the top of the screen there. So Commander Frederick Schrader was the carrier air group commander on the U.S. Hornet. He was shot down over Formosa, was now known as Taiwan. Listed as unrecoverable through help with an outside researcher. Our researchers, we were able to determine that he was one of official short list of candidates that was buried in Hawaii at the cemetery there. And he was identified in 2022. I was able to attend the funeral and see anybody over talking to his daughter, Barbara. So Barbara was 1 year old when her dad went missing, or 2 when her dad went missing. The last gift her father gave her was this teddy bear that had his aviator wings on it and his medal. So you can kind of make out in her arm, in her left arm in the lower picture, that teddy bear has been carrying around for 79 years. I told her during the funeral, like, hey man, can I hold the teddy bear for you so they can present the flag? And she said, I've been holding on to this teddy bear for 79 years. One more day. So she held on to it. You know, Marines don't like to admit that we cry, so I can see my eyeballs sweat a lot when you got. So I get sweaty eyeballs a lot. But it's an amazing way. Unfortunately, her sister passed away about 2 weeks after the family was notified that Commander Schrader had been identified. But just some vignettes of what this mission is really all about. And I know that, you know, one day you will see all of your loved ones with a vignette like this in the future. And that is what every day our men and women put their hearts and souls into with passion, vigor, and enthusiasm to account for as many as we can. And I really encourage you guys, I know the Q&A is at the end, so throughout the day, if you have questions, please write them down. Please stick around. We really enjoy that opportunity to engage in a back and forth feedback. So towards the end of the day, we'll do that Q&A. So I encourage you guys to stick around. Again, just my honor and pleasure to be here to be able to do this job for the 3 years that I've been here at DKA, and just excited for the day ahead. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Mark, and I'll see you guys out about things.
Thank you, sir. All right, this is a part of our program where we're going to go ahead and recognize your loved ones. So we're gonna wait for our service members in the back. So, and to get the mics ready. But if you want to go ahead and share about your loved one, please raise your hand. And we will get a mic to you so you can go ahead and share your story. Mic is on the way. Thank you. I am a product of the greatest generation. And I don't want to break it up. But in my family, my grandparents brought up 8 children. And this was during the Depression, very hard times. And they sent 3 of their sons off to war. Their eldest, my Uncle Al, to the European theater. They sent the second oldest, my Uncle Bill, to the South Pacific. And my dad, who went in later on, did not see battle. But my Uncle Alan and my Uncle Bill saw a lot of that. My Uncle Alan was at the invasion of North Africa, the invasion of Sicily, Utah Beach, fought his way to Battle of Bulge, and then was brought to the rear because he was broke. And after seeing what he saw, you can understand how easy it is to break when you see your fellow soldiers fall, your brothers fall, your friends fall. And you are told to keep going. You are told, don't stop, we have a mission. With my Uncle Bill, my only surviving uncle started the search in the mid-80s. And in the mid-80s, all of these records were still paperwork. Paperwork stuffed in file boxes, stuffed in crates, stuffed in warehouses. And we utilized our local congressman to try and get help. And my uncle did get some paper. We got the final closing of the case from 1949. We got the missing aircraft report. We got all of this information, but none of it led us to any. And my uncle had served at 44 battle missions. He was a assistant radio operator, aerial gunner on B-24 Liberty. Flew 44 missions, was credited with shooting down Jap circles. He was due to come home, he was due to rotate out. And as proud as I am of him, he volunteered to stay to retrain replacements. And that was the mistake that he probably made. But knowing my uncle, it was not the wrong decision at all. This is my uncle. Staff sergeant. He knew his job. He volunteered. And knowing that the chances of coming home in the Pacific War were a 50-50 crapshoot. And especially being in a B-24 Liberty. Those got designated the flying coffin. They were not especially able to take a lot of flak and a lot of aerial artillery. So it was pretty scary. But I think the biggest thing to understand is my involvement in this. I took over from my only surviving uncle, did this, started this in the eighties, and I took over about 5 years ago. I'm dedicated to do this the rest of my life. I just traveled 8,000 miles to go to the airfield that my uncle was flying. He was due to fly into PDG on Caledonia on March 9th. And to pay homage to him, I felt it was the right thing to do for me to go. But it was also important for me to go do some work. In this trip, I made contacts with people who search for the missing. I have a very good friend out of New Zealand who just recently found an aircraft in the Solomon Islands. They are constantly there and available. But part of this is on us. You have to push. You have to ask questions. Sometimes you have to get a little angry only because you're not hearing what you wanted. And you have to do it with respect, but don't discount the other people who are out there who do this for a living. Who do it out of desire to find us. To find those who are missing, to find our family members. And I'm deeply indebted to the individuals I have now found who are going to work on my uncle's case. Along with a man I have worked with now in the DPA, Dr. Robert Thompson, who is gun water. And the MIA unit out of Madison. Please don't insult me. Wisconsin, badger. He's actually a very kind and so nice. Yeah. Well, I'm not a big Max fan. I'm a Brewer fan and Buck fan. But nonetheless, I just would encourage everybody, if you have the opportunity, and like I said, honoring my uncle on the 80th anniversary of his loss. I felt like he was there. I walked that airfield. He knew I was there. He knows I'm looking. And I encourage all of you. Dig it deep. Keep your heels dug in. Do not stop. DPA can do some things. Some of this is on us. So thank you very much for this.
About history of World War II, or the Detroit. Detroit was the first ship to get out of Pearl Harbor. Led the convoy, led the convoy with the contact ship and some deputy embedded in the my dad served in the United States Navy. We were always supposed to go to service at 35 and we lied about it daily because he was 44. He taught each of the mechanics departing about 7 miles. My other 2 years ago than I was in the Navy, served on the destroyer. On China. My stepbrother, 5 years ago, was an aerial photographer. Served with B5, all over the wall, painted wall. They put it back. We're looking for it. He went to the service in 1939. Went through a couple of schools with the Army Air Force. He got to the White House. In 1940. Was on the island, started on the island, was on. Well, supposed to be. Ended up in Manila and several war camps. This information, I think, we received for a while from the group before today. They just ran it one time he was on the table. And Snyder is very, very fellows in life, and it to hear or find that they the view. So, yeah. Okay. Thank you. Was writer at MIA Orange recall because I believe my brother Stephen was in captive. Who was shot down in 1966. He was not a pilot, he was a major. And he was on board an albatross along with 6 other men. And he, less than a year after the shoot down, had a member of the Red Cross contact my family. And he said, upon exiting this aircraft, his left side was severely injured, but we could still presume he is alive and well, along with the rest of his group. They were all captured alive. Nobody returned. I'm so high. I guess I have a question of him. Have we gotten any remains returned by the Chinese or the Russians? And I think it goes without saying anymore. The Russians took not a couple of dozen, but several hundred of our men. They plucked them out of the battlefields from the various countries in Southeast Asia. And they took them to Moscow, they took them to China, and they used them for their expertise. Did we ever get any of their remains back? It's the final year. Yeah. Does anybody have an answer to that? Yeah. You.
Yes, sir. I prefer if we have like Q&As. I would like to keep this to the remembrance ceremony. But when we get to the Q&A, we will address your questions. That's the base, sir. I just want to keep this open to families to share their stories. But we will answer your question.
Well, I'll share my own story of identifying, working on 10 sets of remains. I'm a retired dentist. I think I am one of the major people besides 2 wives of MIAs that had identifications of their husbands from Foxay and the Michael Fanning days. She got the first set of remains back, and they were bogus. They dug up the grave, and she would not settle the case until she had positive IDs. The other case was Ann Hart, but at that time, it was before your tour. They had to know Worley as a forensic anthropologist, as he called himself. He had no degree other than a bachelor's. And yet, the Army allowed him to be called doctor for plea. which was Billings. With my brother, I've always said, I don't want bones back. I want the living man back. And that's, I think we're drawn, the time is very short to have a full accounting unless we demand from the Cambodians, the Lao, the Russians, the Soviets, and why don't we have access to the mortuary in Hanoi, where the mortician said he had more than 400 sets of remains. Have we done that? No. Have we gone into the citadel, the mausoleum, I guess it's called, or Ho Chi Minh, and have excavated sites there? They had hundreds of men that were captive underground below that mausoleum, and they buried them underground. Live signing reports, right and left, they've been debunked, not by, well, not only by the Vietnamese, but by our own government. You know, it's a crying shame. That's what we've had to live, each and every family member here, for years and years. We've had to live with, you can't believe that our government, except for a few, I would say they're not, they're trying to get us to believe a lie that's been perpetuated. And if we keep going the way we've been going, all of our men and women dead. But anyhow, if, you know, keep the faith, don't give up hope, and ask questions. You have to. Thank you.
Thank you. First, I want to thank the staff of the DPAA for all they've done. This is the first time for me to attend this. My grandfather, Ransom Alexander Moore, who was a civilian that's missing in action from the Second World War. Learned a lot of stuff today. Just the narrative that the family had was that he was part of the Army. He was an Army contractor. Just found out he was a contractor with the Navy, which is really odd. So thank you very much for the work that you guys have done. I'm hoping that he will come home soon, but you never know. There's a lot of hope. My background, I'm an Air Force officer for 30 years, so I retired in 2015. So I understand the idea of coming home. I was in Baghdad in 2004, many a day go out. And I would imagine if the worst came to worst, I would want to come home. So I understand that you want to come home to the family, no matter where you are. So I'm hoping that you will come home. I have fun. So, again, thank you very much.
Thank you. My name is Ron Anderson. I'm from St. Paul, Minnesota. And my wife, Paula, and my cousin Conrad Robertson from Lewiston, my family's here. And I am representing my uncle, Urban Ellingson, from Darwin, West Dakota, who was one of 62 American airmen that perished in the Tokyo military prison fire. We bonded with Michael Cleo, Janet Fleming, Pat Howard, Mickey Merrill, before we called and our journey started in 2018, and we submitted our DNA to the Dover Delaware lab. We had to get 60% of the 62 DNA samples in order for the DPAA to go over to Manila, where the 39 caskets endured at the American Cemetery. Because 4 years with the help of the DPAA, with the help of our Gold Star families, Michael Cleo, with the help of 17 senators, the DPAA in March and April of
2022, went over to the American Cemetery. Disinterred those 39 caskets, brought them to the Hickam Air Force Base Forensic Lab, and they've been there since then. Our family has been at the forensic lab 5 times, and it's a long ways from North Dakota to Honolulu. So different parts, groups of our family have done that. I would like to thank, they met us with open arms. Johnny Webb, Tina Schmidt, Yasin Mohammed, Kristen Grove. And it goes on and on. They give you an hour and a half to 2-hour tour. And they're so passionate about finding our loved ones. They tell us that there's no guarantee that they're going to find them. And we tell them back that there is a guarantee that we're going to keep them. It's been 80 years and we're going to keep them. Thank you so much, EPA.
I lost an uncle, he was one of the frozen shows. In the Korean War. And my mom used to talk about it quite a bit. Back when she still had her memory. So, dementia's overtaken her now. But, she's still with us. But, I appreciate all the work that's been done.
So nice to see everybody here. In 22, we did a Zoom, and I got back a lot of information, but there are things that I like to tweak because I think we can put something together. I'm Charmaine Freeman Lindgren, my uncle, and my dad, and there were 3 brothers. My uncle served as a Army pilot in the South Pacific, running, where was he, a second lieutenant, so he would be a pilot. My dad was serving in Persia, which is Iran right now, and the other younger brother was in training. My uncle was shot down January 4th, 1945, right before the end. When he left in 41 for training, I was just a baby. I never met him, but he met me. I don't remember him, but I have his pictures. And he's a blondie with blue eyes, so we look a lot alike. And we got a DNA sample off to the DPAA from his other brother that never did have to go serve. He was in training. But you said you have someone named Ransom. I need to talk to you because I have my first DAR individual is Richard Ransom, and he's buried in Vermont with his family. I go back to the militia, so I have many that have served and died for this country. And I love this country. And it's a good place. And I thank all of you who have been serving under all the problems that you've had faced these last years. Thank you for your service for that. And I'm still looking for the info.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Michael. Here today, honored 3 of our family members who were MIAs in World War II. And the first one I'd like to tell you is Charles Gross, who joined the Army along with a uncle, Billy Ashburn, in March 1951. Billy proceeded on to the Philippines. He was an actor, piano player. He was often trained Filipino soldiers during the invasion of the Japanese. Unfortunately, he was involved in that march. He carried on through Regular, and currently the DPAA has some remains on payrolls, and hopefully one day he will be buried back in Florida with a front. That is also running. My cousin, Charles Rose, joined the military, but like I said, he was trained in the infantry. He participated in combat in the Aleutian Islands. He received a purple mark for that. Proceeded to be trained for a second wave, going to Normandy, which participated in, and then going to France, delivered France. He continued on his unit, received a second part there. December 14th, 1944, in actions that he went off and did on his own. He wound up receiving a Bronze Star that he done there, which was that this man and hurt, they took him back, and he took over the group of men proceeded on to take turns prisoners and public theater, so Christmas Eve of 1944, Carl Gross, Boots is his nickname, was participating near the Roar River, buried down there, Germans, and he was killed. And in Black Day until 1950, when the body was brought back and buried in the war. Your grandfather, Leonard James McNeil, was born Prince Edward Island, Canada, in 1917. His family immigrated to the United States of America in 1926. He graduated from Springville High School in 1936 and bought a 1929 automobile with a boom spoke wheels. He drove that automobile to Orlando, Florida, where he met my grandmother, Alva Cole. Two of them fell in love, married in 38 in Boston, and made their home in Orlando, Florida, where they had 3 children, Paul, my mother Dorothy, and then the Jim. My father, my grandfather, was a bartender at a prestigious hotel in downtown Orlando. When he was 26, he received his draft notice in 1940. He reported Camp Lebanon, Florida, where he was inducted, and proceeded down to South Florida to begin boot camp style. He was then picked up at the B-29 tail gunner, which was very small in Texas and Arizona area, Mexico. February 14th of 45, he was put into a crew, a law crew, 11-man crew at DP-29 of the United States, taken to stay back. They arrived there on the 25th of February, 1945, and he was participated in the fire blitz on Japan that took place through the month of March. Easter morning, April 2nd. The D-45, the law crew was in Tokyo. They were caught in searchlights, and the aircraft was hit by flak. There's a tremendous account of what happened there by one of the surviving members who survived the war. Lieutenant Law gave word for him to jump out. So with the B-29 burning and diving, then Law stayed with the aircraft and died with it. 10 men were able to get out of the aircraft and parachute to theoretically safe landings on the ground. Unfortunately, from there, they're taken as prisoners by the high Japanese military police and interrogated as suspected war criminals. Participation in the napalm bomb was impossible. So things get very, very clear at this point, potentially as what happened to him. Where he was then taken from the Kitty headquarters across the street from the Imperial Palace and moved to the Cookville Military Prison on or about April, late. Late April to mid-May. So as indeed he was in the Cookville Military Prison, with I believe there's another 65 to 62 American. He would have been with Juan's uncle, would have been with Pat's father. Pat, by the way, is the daughter of what would have been Lieutenant Colonel Turner, who would have been the highest ranking person in that prison camp. She is alive, his daughter. She was 1 year old when he left. She greatly anticipating his remains of her father back here, that she can safely put in the grave. Wonderful thing for her to experience like question. For us and our family, of course, my mother's gone, my father, everyone's gone, directly related to my grandfather's existence. However, the journey goes on. So in the event that he was in that prison, he would have died on May 26th, 1945, when the prison was hit with the bomb phosphorus, and allied bombing, and the prison went up in flames. Many were supposed to have gotten out and been killed by jailers. So we went up to 62, 65 American airmen dead on this particular morning, which then orders were given just to dump the bodies into a grave. The grave was a bomb shelter, a big bomb shelter. A whole already there. So, story goes on. War crimes trial is put in place and happened in 1948. Of the remains, of course, in 1950 of the 25 of the men, the 65 were identified, very African America. The remaining 37 became, of course, what DPAA is looking for now. So as our families started getting into what we were doing here, we were really perplexed when you're confronted with the idea that we would have to get DNA samples from 37 different family members. And these 37 of these men. So that was the task at hand. Like I don't know that we did it, but we did do it, and now, like I said, 31 caskets that are on the tables there at Hawaii, DPAA is doing their work. We greatly appreciate what's going on here. And we know that the resources are there. We know that the technology is there. Two things we don't seem to have is enough time, everybody involved. And of course, Senator John Tester, being one of the most powerful men in the world, by chairing the Appropriation Committee, subcommittee, with the Department of Defense, essentially holds the purse strings for everything we have going on here today. So the plea would be for Senator Tester to push more resources to come to these people, more money, more resources, more scientists. Let's do a surge. Let's have a surge on the DPAA. Let's pump the full. They got another 50 grand, they got 200, over 200, they got over $200 million worth of it. That's great. That's about to step up from 160 million when it started this. So we got 200 million. Great. Let's go. Let's go 500 million. Let's just do it for 3 years. 3 years. Let's get more scientists, more people involved, more families involved, more samples on file. It's 80 years, folks. People are dying. Time is running out. You gotta do what about. So that's it for me. I appreciate it. My name is Michael, your grandfather, and what we got.
Yeah, we'll let them in. Should be our last one. We'll get this back on time. As far as the agenda, I know it says a formal break, but for the sake of time this morning, feel free to take a break. Go ahead and go on to the agenda. Go ahead, Nancy.
Janet. I am the niece of Henry Val Young. My uncle Harry I started this journey, this might surprise you. All right, better, sorry. I was a good classroom teacher because I really had to pay attention, listen to my voice. I started this journey looking for a trumpet, which may sound odd, but the story I'd grown up with from my mom was that her brother, Harry, an outstanding musician who always had a swing band in high school, and then again when he was training for his B-29 tailgun job. And she had the dancing feet. They would get boys down in the basement with Harry's band, and mom would teach the guys how to dance. That story, and then first my grandmother as she aged, and then my mom as she aged, came back to one question: what happened to Harry? What happened to Harry? Do you think like people said to the 70s as they returned POWs from Vietnam? Do you think, Jen, dear, they'll find Harry? I didn't know what to say, so I said gently, "Nan, it's 1973. And her whole face just dissolved in front of me. And then, as mom aged, computers, I was doing family research, and I thought, wouldn't it be great if I could find one more story for mom about that brother who carried his trumpet on the B-29 and would play on the long missions as his crewmates called out, "Harry, play this. Harry, play that." One time he didn't hear anything. Grew alarmed. So he took off whatever gear strapped him in. He started crawling in the framework of that airplane. First gunners who passed, sound asleep. Radar, sound asleep. Navigator, sound asleep. Co-pilot, sound asleep. Pilot, sound asleep. And he shook him awake, and the pilot said, "This would be Lieutenant Schofield, don't worry, we have this new invention. It's called automatic pilot." So those are the stories I grew up with, and I wanted one more story for my aging mom that I could tell her about this brother she loved. And thanks to Sergeant McNeil's grandson here, the phone was held to my mom's ear. Probably about 30 minutes. And I said, "Mom, I think I can play Harry." So I'm still looking for the trumpet and the stories that went with it. Please spread it around. Somebody has a letter that some guy on Guam wrote home. But thanks to DPAA, our senators, my congressional representatives, and the tenacious ability to stand here, we have gotten closer and closer. And we can make a change with our government to make sure that funding is not an issue. Thank you very much.
We'll make sure to keep everyone's loved ones in our thoughts, hearts, and prayers. On that note, bow your head for a moment of silence. Thank you. Again, if you take a break, please feel free to your own leisure. We're gonna roll ahead into our next presentation. Let me introduce them. They're gonna come on stage. Army Captain William Ryan, first spot at home, Benedict, and his community science. And we're gonna talk about what they do out in the field. So it's gonna be really exciting. I can have a nice, really exciting presentation. Let's give it up to them.
Hey, good morning, team. I'm Captain Ryan. I've been with the agency about a year and a half now. I've been on 4 recovery missions, all to Vietnam. Prior to that, I was in the 82nd. Today I'm your team leader, so you're all going to go on missions together. Our agenda today, roles and responsibility on mission. We call this a triangle of leadership with us. Getting started, so how we depart, provide, site setup, daily work, field life. What happens if we find something, and then closing the site. Finally, how we build relationships with host. I talked about myself a little bit. I'm the team leader. My roles and responsibilities kind of include mission planning, resourcing equipment, making sure lodging and supplies are all squared away before the project. Primarily, probably the most important thing I do is risk mitigation and safety on site. I'm responsible for the greater good of the team. And also, I do whatever I can to enable the SRE. With me,
My name is Billings. Thank you for being here. I am Tara Krista, Employment Commitment from Massachusetts. I was a part of JPAC back in the day, 2008-13, where I went to Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Vanuatu, and South Korea. Recently, I'm after my second tour with PPAA, and I've been to transfer this internment, and recently came back from the Solomon Islands on the 19th. What I do as an intern is I manage the team. I'll manage the people with big cycle, make sure I have a strong leader with the weaker leaders that we can balance each other out. Make sure they take the appropriate breaks when they need to take the breaks. Make sure everyone's doing okay mentally. As well as going with the SRE here and any SRE we have. I coordinate with them and for them to tell me what it is that they need, and then I make sure it happens. With that, I'll introduce Ms. Mindy Simons.
Good morning, everyone. As our woman said, my name is Mindy Simonson. I am a civilian. I am an archaeologist and scientific recovery expert, SRE, with the DPAA and its former incarnation since about September of 2010. I have deployed 10 different countries, I think, somewhere around 25-ish missions. My primary responsibilities include conducting field investigations and recovery operations, as well as contributing to case progression, mission planning, and back home in Hawaii in the lab, doing material evidence analysis, which means the artifacts that we bring home from these sites, analyzing them to see what they can tell us about your loved ones, about the site, to either hopefully return to you or to feed our future field work to make us more successful.
Get started. So we get our missions assigned to us about 120 days out, and we use that planning directorate to help plan our mission, basically ground. The exciting part is when our STIA or our augmentees get on. So I want to treat you like our STIAs. Our STIAs come with process services to help supplement our team, and they're going to be ERD, medical, photonics, linguists. We'll bring them in about 5 days prior to leaving the island. And it's not a vacation. Okay, you are why you might get a little free time off, but it's a lot of hard work. So we're gonna do the ERD stuff, medical stuff, commerce stuff, and they're gonna actually teach them how to dig and wet screen and build the wet screen equipment properly prior to the park. We also want to take you guys and hike you up Copeland or something like that. Get a good physical assessment. So I'm looking at the team here, and you guys look like you're in good shape and ready to start.
Yeah, that's right. And we want to make sure that the teams are coming in, they know what they're getting themselves into. They know that they're not going on vacation to Italy or Vanuatu or somewhere else or last Vietnam. We express the importance of, we are there because it's family members like you guys who are looking for us to find their loved ones. So we let them know the importance of the work that they're doing and that they're going to be a part of history. They may never meet anybody that we're looking for. They may never meet the family members, but they're still going to rely on.
One of the things that we particularly do during the augmenting setup before we depart from Hawaii for in-country activities is we do some training with teams. We'll training things of that nature, medical. From the science side, we do both on anthropology brief because most of these people do not know what fragmentary remains look like. They don't know what they're going to be seeing once they're in the field, so we do training with them so that they have a better idea of what they're going to encounter when they're out there. And then they know when to call the SRA's attention to something they're finding in the screens.
And so now it's time to depart. We use military aircraft whenever possible, so this was like a big C-17, fully loaded, about 70 personnel, a ton of cargo, and we'd be flying into like Vietnam or Laos. If we're flying to Papua New Guinea, an island hopping, we might unload all that equipment and then load it on the C-130, so we get you a smaller airstrip or a smaller airplane supported by a C-130. Hopefully, we'll close out the site, we can make the trucker stuff in, but it's a possibility to base camp for the next lane load, all that equipment, the helicopters, so that's gonna be like key to our NI-17 to go to that base camp and start building our site infrastructure and our license. So the photos here, you see, it's by, lodging or building platform right there, that's where we're gonna sleep, so it's really solid platform, it's raised off the ground. We're also gonna have trains, fuel kitchen out there, supply sheds, combo shed, medical tent, all that kind of stuff. So it's a pretty deal of work to get the site, in the, in the FOC essentially, so fully operational for us before we actually start executing. And we want to do it to the standard where we don't have to mess with it. At any point throughout the mission, the focus is execution. So getting started, so now we're getting a little bit closer to execution. On the right side, you see a medevac reversal. I think Mindy was on the middle picture there, so she'll talk that a little bit more about that. And then on the left side, you have a bucket release system that they have.
With the bucket release system, every site we go to is different. Sometimes we can have 100 villagers or workers that are lined up and just pass the bucket from the excavated unit. And sometimes we have a release system. So it's all about knowing the terrain, knowing the systems that we can actually utilize and making it more efficient for the SREs so that we can get our multiple equipment you guys.
Like some gentleman said, I'm happy to said, every site is different, the buildup is different, our needs are different. This image in the middle, sorry, I'm really done, is a water recycling pond that we constructed in order to wet screen on a site in us. Some sites we use water for screening, some sites we dry screen. Some sites require a lot more logistical investment before we are up and running. And that's one of the important things we do to cater to each site and each needs in order to be the most efficient that we can out there. This was a big undertaking to build. We had 2 of these pools side by side, screened. All the water and the mud would flow into this. And then for the end of the mission, as the flood built up that we were screening through, we would have to get in and hand bucket out all of the mud because we were on a slope about this. And so there was no way we were getting machinery out there to do it for us. So we just had team members that just sucked in the mud, fill the bucket, pat it down, dump it over the side. It was a big undertaking. But that work allowed us to work so much faster in the actual processing of what we were doing. So it really kind of depends on what we're doing. Sometimes it seems like there's more time before we actually begin digging. But a lot of times, it's because we are setting up systems like this, make us operate so much more efficient.
Along with the different types of sites we go to, in Vanuatu, we're on a side mountain. So we'll sometimes use plywood and build a retaining wall in place. So that way when we're harnessed in and we're hanging on the side of the cliff, we're picking away at the dirt is gonna be captured. So that way we can make sure we have everything needed, so we're not missing anything. That's one of the other difficulties that we go through sometimes, but we should make sure that we have all our protocols and equipment. So you will have a harness and people hanging out on the side of the cliff to make sure we put everything.
All right, so now you're fully excavating this one. Right side, you see a couple open units and steps. That's because of the depth and the slope you're seeing on that side there. On the bottom left, you see some dry screens and kind of the bucket brigade is what we call it. And then above that is you see someone kind of excavating on the site. So we have about that process. I think Minnie is the one that teaches us the method that she wants on site, and we basically tell the whole team to make sure we keep that next route.
He's exactly right.
Like with the build up of the site excavation needs are different. So it changes depending on what we're doing. The image on the right of that screen is that same site in Mouse that we dug the ponds. And that is a single excavation unit that we dug at once. Because of the depth and the steepness of that slope, we did what we call spare sweep. They get down the steps so that we can operate in their safety. As well as not have to dig what we don't need to dig. Because that's the time that we don't need to spend. We dig what we need to, all the, what we call incident related material, every positive that could be related to that loss. But we don't need to go deeper. And so part of our focus is making sure that we're understanding what we need and doing what we need without wasting time. What we don't need to do.
Right, so the fun part, field line. So in Laos, Vietnam, we work about 9 days on and 1 day off. So we work the teams pretty hard, and we know we have a limited amount of time to actually accomplish that mission, that site. So we use up every single minute that we have possible. If there is not a guest house or a hotel within 90 minutes of the site, we're going to put a base camp at that location. It's just more convenient to wake up, start executing work right down the spots. And then what you see in this is plenty of rain, plenty of mud, and all that kind of stuff. This looks like a very nice basement. They have a little much in there. Looks like a decent kitchen there. Plenty of towels and stuff like that. But we don't really see it's probably 122 degrees right now. Humidity is probably about 100%. And at least the rain forms, so it's going to cool these down. It's probably going to take a rain bucket shower or something like that. You really can't see the wildlife. So the area like this, you're going to have leeches, centipedes, scorpions, plenty of snakes, of course, and we're all trying to figure out how to live with them. Kind of like when I was coming to town and you're trying to, wait and figure it out before you get too far along. So you know it's there, you know you're looking out for each other, and when I looked up a case of water, I'm trying to get centipede in there. Same thing with scorpions and stuff like that. So we don't want to have things, what that snake bite or even the scorpions and centipedes are a pretty big issue. You're gonna dig the unit and you're probably gonna find a couple snakes throughout your jail.
Along with centipedes and snakes, there are the spiders. Anyone here like spiders? No, I hate spiders personally. Yeah. So at this particular base camp, it was extremely wet, and occasionally we almost thought we were going to get flooded out, but we didn't. But we had our kitchen flooded, and there was one night that we were all eating dinner, and people went back to their tents to grab those, whatever that we would share and read and just talk, because that's where the light was. And I screamed, I kid you not, I didn't know I had that high voice in me, but I screamed because the spider was this big. It was not cool. So the spider came out and ran underneath our kitchen hut, and the SRE, it was Dr. Freaks. She said, what happened? And I told her, then everyone else came out and they all looked under and found spider. So spiders are dynamics. And here you can kind of there's that cloud rash. Weird stick bugs that there was a stick. I was with Mindy on actually the same site on a different mission. And there was a stick bug. You guys know like the stick bugs, and when they kind of you're playing music, it looks like their hands are going up. So this stick bug was doing that, but then he was acting weird. And so somebody caught it and then kind of like put it out of his away, and just a giant worm came falling out. It was the most nasty thing. It was gross. Needless to say, the table was really sanitized that night and the next day and the day after. Multiple days. But the being at a base camp is a great thing. It's difficult, as missions are in general, there's always difficulties. But when we work with the local villagers, they come out and they kind of not necessarily hang out with us, but we embrace to talk to them through our language. But you even need to speak the language, but body language is everything. We share our food with them, they share their food with us. The more rapport that we build with them, the more we can get from them, and maybe interest too. On different investigation teams, you build that rapport with the local workers, with the local villagers, with the people in the country. And then they can be like, oh, I know that I come over here, or I've seen something over here. And say for Solomon Islands, we do that. And then sometimes they'll take us out and say, oh, that's a Japanese thing. But that definitely has moms on it. So we're going to follow the guys, so guys, to come out and make sure that your home and your family can be safe to really themselves. So there's a different type of rapport building from basement village workers to IT village workers. And it's just something that it's hard to put into words, but it's an amazing teamwork.
In addition to the local workers, teams are amazing. It really improves team cohesion because you're all kind of in the stuff together. You're out there for 30 days, 40 days. And most of the time it's hot and sweaty, you're covered in bugs and mud and you miss your family and you're working all day and every week there's probably someone on your team you find kind of annoying. You're never getting away from them. Cook with them, eat with them, sleep with them, you're going up their air mattress at 2 in the morning, waking up the entire camp. As some person on our mission did, I think everyone wanted to just pop his air mattress for him, so we couldn't do that anymore. But it really kind of helps improve the team morale. And as tiresome as it can feel, it's this mission, as you all understand and know, it's a very easy mission to motivate yourself for. It's a very easy mission to motivate a team for. So when you're out there on day 21 or day 37, this is a family, they're sick of each other, and they're sweaty and they're covered in rashes and weird bug bites and things that who knows where they're from. That's all we have to do, is remind ourselves why we're there. We look at the site where you put up with your loved ones pitched on. This family has been waiting for 60 years, 80 years. We can suck it up and heat the mugginess and the bugs and the mud for 5 more days, 2 more weeks, whatever it is. So it's crazy, but it's awesome at the same time. And I've never seen so many weird bugs in my life. I think my phone is full of pictures of weird bugs. I should be like Matt Field or something.
I mean, us both. Left side, Southeast Asia, taking a bucket bag in the rain, and then the right side, maybe the Himalayan mountains. Okay, so they're very high, they're still on the ground, and the 2 different environments are, extreme. Okay, and we are prepared to build teams across the globe to accomplish missions in both these environments. We have to be ready for that stuff. So physically prepared, we are things squared away, and overall, we as man, thank you.
Planning effectively is key. It partly contributes to what equipment we decide to take. Most of the places we go are warm, usually, but obviously there's places that are cold, like India. I actually did a mission to Greenland, where we actually were camping out on the ice cap. And there were times where it was sunny and all of our ice was melting, and the whole terrain of the ice pack was very different than it had been even far before. And then towards the end of the mission, we got a snowstorm and we woke up one morning and it started really weird. It's been windy up there, as you can imagine. There's nothing to walk away. You hear the ice crystal tent. We woke up one morning and it was just silent. A little creepy. And I crawled in my tent. We were completely buried in snow. We actually had to dig ourselves out of our tents. And then we're expecting more snow that next night. And it's dangerous to get completely buried in snow in a tent. So we took shifts. We'd have 2-man teams that pulled our like night watch shift. We'd walk around the camp with a broom, knock all the snow off everyone's tent so that no one got suffocated in their tent. And at the same time, we had equipment, type of GPS that we could use. I definitely checked before I took it. It said it was rated for all the temperatures that I might encounter in Greenland. And I mean, it worked, but it definitely did not like cold. And so I would screen, which was a touch screen, not respond well to Greenland temperatures and cold wind. So I would sleep with it in my sleeping bag. And then during the day, when I was out on the site exposed, and it was very cold, I would shove it back inside my coat in between using it, so it would stay warm enough that it would respond to what I was doing. So it's definitely one of those things where we're in crazy environments and hopefully trying to MacGyver things to make it work so that we still achieve our job, even when all elements are trying to make that exceedingly difficult.
Maybe you know, it's easy to stay motivated on the issue. So a lot of mornings I like to start with like, you know, a news article on that area, or maybe a diary entry that they have or another. And you can find that on open source. So maybe that stuff that you have on, EPA, like it helps fuel the mission. It helps motivate those teams. So we appreciate that stuff, especially in certain services, stuff like that. We start that, and then we go through an 8-hour day. Long, hard work day, it's very hot. And then at the end of the day, we find something, do something called showing talent. What that does is show what we found on sites, and then gets the eyes of the team ready to go. This is what we're looking for. We're warming up on site. It's a huge boost. Say it, yeah. Huge amount. Maybe we'll cover the rest of this. Awesome.
Yeah, it's finding something is the end all be all, right? It's our goal. Hopefully we're finding remains. We're finding something that can correlate this site to your level of loss incident. Identification media, dog tag, something that correlates the plane specifically. Even outside of that, finding something small, something that you would have been wearing life support equipment. Can be so exciting when we haven't been finding anything up to that point. One site I dug in Thailand, and we found a fair amount of stuff there for us. But we found a data plate, most of it gone, but you could see was English. It said New York, New York. We were very excited to see anything that had English on it at that point. But we had local workers, and they were so excited. They started playing Alicia Keys' New York, New York's home. Last night, I will say they were so excited and invested in this. And so that's one of the things we do too. When we find stuff, is not just showing it to our team so that they know what they're looking for, and they know what's doing and what we're finding, but also sharing with those post-station partners and workers who are helping us in this process. All that being said, of course, when it comes to remains, that's something that is highly respected. There's no passing around of potential remains. There's no photography outside of official photography of potential remains. That is something that is always treated with utmost respect.
And going on to that as well, when I was in Laos, we had about 100 partners with us. But one of those workers lost his grandfather against our guys back in that time. But he was there working with us, trying to help us find our guy. And so the rapport that we can build with the workers, and the workers can find stuff sometimes sooner than we do, because they know that they've been farming in the dirt, they've been farming that land forever. So they help us a lot when it comes to what we're looking for. They can point where they're right there. And they're like, but for us, it's right there. And so that's another important thing about when they do tell us something, we let the SREs know. And if the grid that we're working, then work stops for a moment. So they say, or if it's in the screen, if there is, what we think is going in the screen, you stop. We get the SRE to come on over so they can verify. That's something that I take really seriously, and it's a huge boost because then we know where we're looking. We know what we're looking for. We know, all right, we're gonna find this guy here. But then at the same time, sometimes when we go out on missions, we don't find them. That's okay because we know where not to look next time, which makes us one step closer to where we might be.
Just to add one more thing about this. It is a very tedious process, the screening. The majority of things that we do find does come in the screen. And it's small. People have to be very focused on it, very detail oriented. And it does take time. You can fill a bucket with 30 seconds. Depending on how the dirt breaks down and how it works, that could take 5 minutes to screen. It could take 15 minutes to screen. So it's a very tedious process. That's partly why things take the time they do when we are out in the field for these recoveries, and it can't just be a quick turn. As fast as we would like that to be. This very meticulous process is what gets us to recovering your level, because a lot of it is very small pieces. It can be small as to dental prosthesis, portion of an ID card, this the size of a thumbnail, but it might have a service number on it, it might have his last name on it, and those tiny little things are a lot of times what get us to making that identification.
closing the site. So this happens very rarely. We would dig probably to like last couple of hours and close down the site very rapidly. We want to maximize our opportunities. So they dig all morning, close our last units, then we have to close that site and then we do stay. On the right side, you see them laying the sandbags. That was a dug unit that's now sterile and put sandbags in there to kind of keep the infrastructure of that unit. That we don't want, getting that in there, like, so it's like, erosion and stuff like that. Plus, it's easy for that sort of accessory to find that unit to keep data on. One side, I'm just gonna talk about this stuff, but it's not written down, and that didn't happen, so it's probably, when you look at it in the paper, it's
Yes, that's Renee drawing the dirt, which actually really means something to us, and telling us where we need to dig, how deep, where incident related material is present. When we finish the end of a mission, that is scheduled end, if we finish early, if we finish late, we either suspend the site, meaning we're not done. I think there's more work to be done here, and we prepare it for keeping its integrity as much as possible until the next team can come. Or we can close the site, and that's if we believe that we have archaeologically exhausted that location, which means the probability of additional rains is exhausted. And at that point, we close down the site, we document everything, and writing everything down, pictures, closing everything up properly, and depending on needs of conversation, sometimes we have backfill, sometimes we don't. It is a tedious process, like many of these things I'm talking about. And we do have to backfill, so when we need the mission on the 15th, we have to be on site by the 14th. Back plan, okay, I need to start backfilling on the 13th. I need to take final photos on the 12th. We need to be cleaning up, scraping down the last, breaking down things on the 11th. And that's kind of the process that we go through in order to either suspend a site or close it, and that team to leave that site.
Relationship building. So when we go out, we are ambassadors and representatives. Okay, so it's for the mission, it's for the agency, and it's also for the community as well. So we need to continue to build partnerships across the globe. So we'll have team going events. You see soccer, volleyball is very good. Also, we go out for dinners and stuff like that. Normally, a lot of places I've gone, especially like Papua New Guinea and Vietnam, do an opening and closing ceremony. The thing is very similar, okay? So we do the ceremony, basically asking the land for permission to bring back our fathers and fathers. And that's kind of universal as well across the board. Yeah.
Going with that, it allows us the same way, there's an opening ceremony, and then by the end, that rapport that was built within the villages and the people, the camaraderie is just super tight. It's like an extended family. So at the end, sometimes they'll give us bracelets, and they'll express their interest in sending a message to the county through our list and through us. And sometimes there was literature also on one of the Vietnam team. One of the local villagers, he wrote a letter, and it was actually the view for everyone that we could bring home our fallen, to bring home your family members, and they can see that they try to do it as well.
And locals, like I said, are really, the ones we work with, they really become invested. One of my local workers, who's an amazing young man, probably 25, and he's in Thailand, and they were doing a local press thing, and he was interviewed. And he started crying, he was talking about this individual that we were looking for. This 25-year-old man who had no connection to this at all, other than working with us for the last 45 days. And he felt it so strongly. He actually got sick and then came back and was so upset that he didn't miss a day of work with us. Crying that he missed it, and he wasn't there to help us find this individual and bring him home. And that really, I mean, it means a lot, obviously, to us. And I hope it means a lot to you guys. It's not just us. It is our host nation partners. It is the local we work with. You can see actually that bottom left photo. Kind of in the background on the tarps, there's these two white boxes. Those are our site tours. Those are pictures of the individual. It has the circumstances of loss and some other specifics, and we usually try to do them both in English and also in the local language. So whatever that is, so our counterparts, the officials, local workers, they can read it, they can understand as well, and they really become invested in the process.
To continue that, so that was my side on the bottom left. And we first started JFA, we asked the locals, like, hey, who's been on site, who's helped us out? And for that side alone, 9% of the local workers, would raise their hand essentially. And they all have been on site for the past couple decades, helping with that site and the progress of that site. Their information is a huge help, plus they understand how we operate as well. So they help us out tremendously. And to pay really for our grants and stuff like that, and mission, we'll have a collection, item treats, all that kind of stuff. A lot of times, like I like to buy some school supplies for the roads. Then mission, I think, Travis Cluster, been.
All right, so in the mission, everyone is exhausted, but it's an honorable that we just, sometimes we'll do a honorable carry at the end, because we did 9 ravines, or we believe to be ravines, and then sometimes we don't. But oftentimes our goal is to find someone. So at the end of the mission, C-17, C-130, even calm air. Either way, you can see it's, I think it's the best way to travel on military flight. Anyone else? Travel military flight? Over there in the corner, you have a couple. You can lay out a sleeping mat, you can set up a hammock, watch movies, read a book. You're not congested with your knees bent and sitting behind somebody who may or may not use you as a pillow next to you. You never know. But end the mission, and that's, once we get back to Hawaii, our EOD, if there were upwind teams, they return their EOD equipment, we do debriefings, our medics return their medical equipment. And again, just like in the beginning of the mission, as a concern, to make sure that they're mentally and physically prepped to go on the mission. At the end, make sure that they're mentally and physically able to continue what it is that they have to do. But if they have any questions or if they get upset about anything, then we talk to them. I'm gonna try that everything's okay.
Only note I would have is that this is a not very full C-17, so if you're on one of these, it's fantastic. Another mission have 6 17s on them, so there is no floor space. And we sometimes stack free, and if you end up on a C-130, yeah, you definitely are zippered in with each other immediately and sweating and freezing. But it's how we always know each other really well. Embrace the sun, right? Make the best out of the situation that you're in.
It's a great time. And a lot of times, so you leave on Tuesday and you're gonna arrive back in July and say, like, kind of leave that day. That's all we got about the mission. Thank you for your time. And that's all we have to read.
As a reminder, we have the surveys in your folder, so as you hear each presenter, you can go ahead and fill out the surveys that everyone will go ahead and collect those surveys towards the end of the day. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. He's going to talk a little bit about the recovery and ID process and how that all goes down. He'll the curtain back for us. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Franklin David, he's our lab director out of Nebraska.
You guys hear me okay? Excellent. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Franklin David. I am a forensic anthropologist. I'm a board certified forensic anthropologist by the American Board of Forensic Anthropology. So my specialty is the human skeleton. In my role as a deputy laboratory director, however, I have traded bones for phones. So what I tell you today is based on my memory of what it used to be like as a forensic anthropologist. Here's kind of our operation that we're going to go through today. First, we're going to talk about from the laboratory perspective, our field operations. That's basically how do we get evidence from the field into the laboratory for us to begin the analysis. We then talk about what happens once that evidence, to include human remains, is in the laboratory. What are all the individual lines of evidence that we're looking at? And then we're going to tie that together in the use case of the work that is kind of a case study example from the projects that we're working right now. And then we'll kind of pause and then we'll end it with just, I don't know if it's an update so much as it is just an awareness on how we in the laboratory keep this 81,000 elements of missing service members, so to speak, right? How we take bite-sized pieces out of this and work and focus in different areas of how we go about achieving the vision. We can't, as much as we'd love to, we can't do it all at once. So we'll just jump right into our field operations. We've already heard a couple times just recently for three of our experts who are doing this today. How do we get evidence into the laboratory? Basically through two means. It is that we actively pursue evidence. To include human remains. That's sort of traditional archaeological discovery, which you've heard a lot about, as well as our disconfirming of unknowns for one of our cemeteries across the globe. Now, it's important to understand that we don't just drop a team in Germany and say, hey, see you in 45 days, good luck, let us know what you find. Or you don't take them to the door of the Ardennes National Cemetery and say, see you in a couple of weeks with a couple of remains, right? This all begins. It is only possible by narrowing that search space of 81,000 missing people down to smaller sections, smaller areas. So there's a recovery. Can I get to a particular spot on the map where I can begin to do an investigation to send somebody to then lead into a recovery? Can I take one of these unknowns that has an X file associated to it, work with our historians or anthropologists and dentists looking back at the historical record to say, hey, I think this set of remains that was recovered here, the historians will know that order of battle. They'll place that remain into a particular part of engagement. We'll look at the information that was recovered by the grave registration of command at that point in time to say, hey, I think those sets of remains can be associated to 5, 6, 10, 300 people. And then once we have a meter threshold that says, I think that it's more likely than not, we can make an identification of one of those individuals. We then pursue the ability to get the remains out of them. So just as an example of that, this one starts 15th of October, 1942. Pilots of P-39s are bombing stripping run Guadalcanal Canal. They are bombing the troop deployment of the Japanese to the island. The other part of this this presentation where you'll hear over and over again is about the controlled recovery of information, whether that's the historical record, the archaeological record, the biological record, and how they all come together. It's also about opportunity. And the first example of opportunity we may have that I'll present to you is when our researchers and historians are out at the National Archives and Records Administration looking for information about losses in Guadalcanal. They are looking at the 25th Infantry Division records. They're looking for land losses of the infantry on land. Through the search of the records, opportunity presents itself and they find a record about a 25th ID individual that saw a plane just outside of the Henderson airfield, which is the U.S. controlled airfield at that point in time. And they saw remains in the airplane. That then leads us to say, well, that's what's happened to this. Turns out that through the work that historians are uncovering on this case, they're able to determine the flight path. They know the last known location of this pilot, circumstances of his loss. He was last seen at the rendezvous point in the air with his other squadron. 10 minutes before they all returned to the airfield. He didn't show up. What happened to him? The historians were able to figure all of this information out. And then that leads us to then say, hey, let's go talk to people. Let's go out on the risk, go to Guadalcanal. Let's go to the area where we see historical records and then just go to the closest village. You talk to the village leader and they say, it's right over here. They take you to the spot where you can see this kind of hard to see here, but that's an engine block. That engine block got some numbers on it, and they're able to find that engine block with P-39. There's only one P-39 lost on land at Guadalcanal, piloted by one pilot that we get in. That then leads you to say, hey, we're pretty sure now we've gone from, Solomon Islands, the Guadalcanal Canal to this area just east of Henderson Field to this particular area. We now launch out with a recovery team to do the whole recovery. We've heard already that the recovery methods that we use are going to be varied as the sites are that we go to. Sometimes if you're looking for an isolated burial and you see the use of a heavy equipment, you know that the burial, you're pulled the burial down to a particular depth, you're removing the overburden. You're using the heavy machinery to do it a lot faster than you are with shovels. Thankfully, that's something that you have access to, you really want to use them. Once you will use that until you get to that archaeological feature, that thing in the landscape that's not supposed to be there. And then you stop and use the heavy equipment and then move into it. Similarly, you're working on slopes. The cedars are strapped in, you have all of the appropriate safety gear, proper mount, the training. Those things you do if you're going underwater with all the proper underwater, scuba training. So it's maximizing your time on the ground to do the recovery will also be safe to do so. And the job of the archaeologist out on that field site is to define the limits. That's the first pass, right? Of is how big is the site we're looking for? That means you need to understand the horizontal limits as well as the vertical limits of that site. What you're looking at here is what is written in dirt that the anthropologist, the archaeologist is interpreting. They're looking at the soils particularly. They're looking at different layers to see what's there. You see the top layer in this photo, which is just your erosional layer, your organic level. That's followed by a darker yellow brown, and below that you have a lighter brown sandy soil. And to an archaeologist, this is their textbook. This is what you're looking for. You will also see that within that middle layer, you have bits of oxidized aluminum skin. You have wire. This is what is called the incident layer. You've heard Mindy refer to that earlier ago. This is the area where you want to do the excavation, and you will follow this layer across, and if that layer goes down deep, you're going to go down deep. You're always going to take it down to that next layer below it, that incident sterile soil. You're always paying attention to that because you don't want the team to continue just going down into that incident sterile soil and wasting time. You want to take them over that. You're also looking to control the horizontal dispersion. Seconds is what it takes for an aircraft to crash. You have 80 years of time for the site formation process to take place. It's that archaeologists to understand the dynamics of the crash, to look at the landscape, to be able to pull of information for the archaeological record, which includes site formation processes. You're going to start by going out to the site. So take, for example, that T-39 crash in Guadalcanal Canal. The first thing that archaeologists are going to do on site is work with the EOD technician who's got a metal detector, and you're just going to survey the full area. You're going to start dropping 10 flags everywhere you get a metal here. And you're going to stand back and you're going to look at the distribution of those flags across the landscape to see, right? You're going to want to know, you're near a river, does this river flood? And these are the kinds of questions you're asking to the village. Yes, it floods. How often? But every year, every 5 years, where does the water go? Does it just sit here and then go down? Because that's cluing the archaeologist in to think like, oh, I'm getting a lot of sediment deposition that's taking place here, and I'm going to have to go deeper. Or does it flood and then just immediately push it right off? You're not going to have much deposition, but maybe you have a really long horizontal distribution. So you're measuring all of those things in the 10 flags, and then you set up a grid. So usually a 4 by 4 meter grid that goes over the top of it. Typically you put stakes in every 4 meters and you create it. 5.62 meters is what the hypotenuse is, 4 by 4 meter. So you do all of this work, and the reason you're doing that, so I'll go back to the same comments, control recovery of evidence, to include human remains at the site. It's knowing that this piece of material evidence came adjacent to this tube from this area. You can see in the image where you have all those red dots, right, the caches of information that's there that leads the anthropologist in the lab to start with the first hypothesis of, hey, maybe that material, maybe it's an IP tag. I think that ID tag around some things, maybe that's gonna be the first thing that we're gonna test, and the little interview with now in that case. Finally, once all of the evidence is recovered and you have excavated the site, its full limits of what is likely to return together, right? It's the material evidence that you have in the last report. The site is completed, the evidence is contained within an evidence container, your plastic bag, you have all the convenience information. That's the word that just means three-dimensional location in space, horizontal and its depth. It goes on that bag, and that information will forever stay tied to that evidence that came out of that bag, no matter how far down the other line you go. It goes on a chain of custody document. It goes into the case, it gets locked, and then brought back to the lab and to the host station. The other way in which we get evidence into a laboratory is our disinternment operations. I said a little bit about meeting that threshold, most likely, or more likely than not, make an identification off of the remains that are reported to be in a grave and the individuals that may be associated. So it's the controlled recovery of information from the historical record and its opportunity that the remains that you're looking for are actually in that grave, or that you recover them from that site. You're looking at primary source documentation, you have X files, you'll hear about later today in breakout sessions. And it's the ability to compare the opportunity that you have to compare that information to existing comparative information. Do I have a record of where that service went to high school? Because if I find a ring, it's a high school graduation ring with an inscription on it, it's a piece working right now. Can I go find that information? Can I find the yearbook in the high school in the town that I can associate with one of you guys that found this list? An additional line of evidence that we're looking. And when we talk about these cemeteries, we're talking about the American Battlefield Monument Division cemeteries that are across Europe. And in Manila, as well as the one on the other international memorial cemetery. So the USS Oklahoma that was mentioned earlier this morning, that all came from the National Memorial Cemetery. Bottom line, President Well, coming out of Manila. We're moving in now, once evidence is recovered, it makes its way into one of our two laboratories. We have our main laboratory, original lab location up in Hawaii, and our new laboratory at the Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska, where I'm coming from. Lived down the road with you guys here. The laboratory is divided into a number of multidisciplinary teams. We are primarily forensic anthropologists. We also have forensic dentists. We are both civilian employees, contractors, and active duty military members. We have a chief medical examiner who was a member of the Armed Forces Medical Examining System. And he signs all of the death certificates. He presented all the information to our teams that went public. I also want to point out that the second bullet there, that our laboratories, ever since about 2003, have been an accredited forensic testing laboratory. That means that we have internal controls, we have a procedure that we follow, and we have internal audits every year to make sure that we do what we say we do. We also have external auditing bodies that come in to look at us to make sure that we're doing what we're doing, and that we say we're doing. That the individuals who are doing this work all have the appropriate credentials and the right experience to be doing this work. I think you're an appropriate member of you're an appropriate forensic practitioner that is useful for determination. Now, when we make an identification, we're looking at multiple lines of evidence. Not every case is going to have every line of evidence contribute to it. Take, for example, the tooth that gets recovered at the site. So you have historical information that took you to that location. You have the circumstances of the area where you are, about the history. You have the tooth that a dentist will look at. They'll inventory, tell you what tooth it is. That tooth may be sampled for DNA. That tooth may also be sampled for isotopes. So that then would be the suite of evidence that you're looking at for that particular case. But the cases that are much larger, that have a lot more skeletal material, vulnerability, problem with all. We'll go through them individually. The material evidence basically are non-biological materials, all the things that you find, it's not vulnerable. Become critically important for the archaeologist processing inside, because if they find life support, like helmet fragments, fire fragments, oxygen masks, explosives, these are things that the crew of the pilot had on. This is what helps directly with the property down. It also helps you know that if you are doing an excavation on an F4, F4 has 2 seats in it. F4 has 2, each seat has 2 D-clips to hold that seat into the floor of the F4. If your excavation finds 3 of those D-clips, that tells you that both seats were there at that site. Can be things like identification patterns, something tied to the individual, a wedding band with an inscription. Useful if you have the opportunity to know when the people were married. Is there a record that says, yes, this individual was married, this is the date they were married? Without that information, I have a wedding band with a date on it that I keep kicking myself in the pants for because I can't connect it to somebody. It can also be useful to help identify the incident itself, right? Are you finding something that's connected to an aircraft or to a particular incident? Do you find evidence that's consistent with U.S. Army issued material for ground troops in Europe at that point in time? For instance, anthropologists, this is the majority of the work. First thing anthropologists though, they're signing a case, they know nothing about the case they're given. They operate blindly. It's not the anthropologist that recovers the site of the analysis of their name. Their first task is the inventory. What do I have? What decisions do I get to make based on what I've been shown in the first place? They're going to ask themselves questions. Does it even bone? If it doesn't go through a screen through a 4-inch wire mesh, hopefully your archaeologist and your team is going to bring it back. Don't take that information. Bring it back. We'll clean it up. We'll look at it in a while. And if it's rock, we'll take it all day long and we'll get rid of it. It's not a problem. But don't lose that to the group that you think is a rock. It's dirty. Bring it back and we'll slow it down. If what you have is bone, is it even human bone? We probably have more non-human goats and deer that have been lost across Europe than any one place I can think of. But again, I would prefer that it comes back and take that determination allowed rather than leaving something at birth and let it go. Once they've made those determinations, they're asking the question, how many people are present? They're looking for duplication, but it's a fragment, they're identifying a human fragment, and where in the body is that fragment going? Sometimes cases are nothing but small fragments. The case I worked with where I was able to say that 2 people were present and the assemblage was presented because of one duplicated light small piece of bone. That's how you can tell that you have multiple people present. Once they've done all of that and isolated and separated out the remains of one individual, their job is to establish a biological profile. Sex, age, ancestor stature, what individuating circumstances or conditions that this individual has that may help them. But more importantly, the anthropological contribution is sorting functional remains of individuals and then narrowing that search space. And if you narrow the search space in the field, right? You can Solomon Islands, blow it out to the east of the airport, to a site, to an excavation. And you then have the remains that come in and you start pulling down the line to look for just that one individual. Another task that's been developed out of the laboratory is our chest X-ray comparison. The laboratory did not develop the ability to compare anymore in the post-mortem X-rays. It's something that forensic medicine's been doing for a long time. But I talk about the control, recovery of information and opportunity. Opportunity existed here because of the availability of chest X-rays from World War II. These were not taken and searched them because they thought they could someday be used to identify. They were being taken to see if the service member was fit for service. Is there a sign of chronic, is there a cloudy image of tuberculosis, some chronic lung infection that's going to fluid surgery? We have access to those. In fact, I probably got rolls and rolls and millions of images. And of those, only a very small percentage of those that are actually part of our condition. But when the opportunity exists to have that antemortem X-ray, and we have the postmortem, the clavicle, collarbones, and the neck, the bones of the neck, your thoracics and your upper thoracic cervical rib. We know because it was the military exactly how every one of those chest X-rays was taken. We have the technical manual, we know how far they were standing from the radiation capture device and how far the film was. And able to recreate that when we have the post-mortem remains to put them into the appropriate position to then take that image. And when we do that, we're looking then at points of concordance in the morphology, size, and shape of these bones. We're looking from the postmortem into a series of different individual antemortem photographs of their chest X-rays. And ultimately, we are confirming that association through the photographic superimposition of those two antemortem. We use it to not only include an individual to make an association, but we also use it to exclude certain groups. If there is a service member of us whom I don't have a DNA reference sample for, but I have a chest X-ray, I have a file, I can run a comparison and maybe exclude them from that list, which is helpful for us, especially if they're being pointed to a different individual. I still have to exclude all of those. Another analysis that we did not develop, but I would say are perfecting for forensic use is for independent street stable isotope analysis. And you have all heard, your mothers have told you that you are what you need, which is not wrong. We've used stable isotopes to look at diet, to be able to see whether or not you were raised on a corn-based diet, rice-based diet, different carbon pathways that they get integrated and written into the bone. And it is our forensic chemists and anthropologists who know the language that can read that information in the bones. You find a small fragment in Southeast Asia, we're using this to see, is this one worth pursuing? Can I do an analysis on this and see if it's a US-based diet individual or not? If it's not, then that's the end of that case. If it is, then we'll be shooting for work. I don't have to plot up a Q or a DNA laboratory with this, but to then tell me that this is a South Asian. Forensic dentistry, one of the tried and true methods of human identification. What we're doing, what our dentists are doing is pattern recognition, pattern matching. We're looking at World War II and Korean War for matching record paper documents. A dentist shows up to look at your teeth and they record what's happening on your tooth. The human has 32 positions in your mouth for a teeth. Each tooth has 5 surfaces. And on each one of those surfaces, you can have a decay, you can have a restoration, you can have a whole tooth extracted before death. When you start adding up all the possibilities that you could possibly have, it becomes astronomical, right? And that becomes very useful to us, because when I'm looking at a pattern match between the postmortem set of remains and the availability of the antemortem record, I can tell you how rare that match is in out of the general population compared to hundreds of thousands of other possible records that we have. Similarly to isotope data and to our chest X-ray data, the dental data can give us an exclusionary course of action as well as including associated. For DNA evidence, we have had, ever since the early 90s, the Honor Course of DNA Identification Laboratory was established, we've had a very good, long relationship with them. They perform all of our DNA work today. We did back in the 90s. We take a sample, we send a sample to the lab, we they compare it, they perform mitochondrial nuclear DNA analysis on the bone, they report those results to us. We use DNA for two ways. In large projects, with 13,000 plus sets of types of bone present, we're using DNA to narrow that search space. USS Oklahoma had over 13,000 individual bone specimens present. We took just around 4,000 bones for DNA samples. And if each one of those bone samples produced a DNA sequence, then I can group all the bones that produce that same sequence. That's what you see in this image here. I no longer have a assemblage of 13,000 bones that are just one of like 400 people. I can take that information, and each black square that you see is one DNA sequence, which is different from another black square. Tied to the squares are the colored dots, which represent different bones that produce that sequence. And that allows the anthropologist now to focus on one area to then begin expanding out and figuring out what other bones they can bring in to match up with that individual. So we're using it to sort, to help separate and make individual identifications, get us to do our individual identification, which happens when we make a particular frequency on person DNA ID lab, compare that DNA sequence against the family reference that you guys provide. And when I started out and said not all evidence is equal, it is by far the most powerful tool that we have in our care for data identification, especially now with the advances in technology and the ability to get nuclear DNA out of we have the ability to make identifications and with a likelihood of a match is in the order of millions, if not billions. That's why it's incredibly important. You have not provided any of the sample with please consider doing it. Lastly, in our case study, this is one that we're working the last 100 years out of the Omaha Laboratory, Mission Iowa. So 1 August 1943, bombing of the oil refineries at Flushing, Maine. This was early in the war and involved in Europe. It was taken over North Africa, and the thought was that we wanted to ditch the oil, reliance on oil, the fueling of the German war. The Operation Highway, 177 24s took off to Gillespie. 22 crashed in and around the town of Billings. The local citizens were covered and buried them into what became the hero section of all one cemetery. After the war, the American Grave Registration Command exhumed the graves, identified who they put, and those that they could not identify remained unknown. There were 85 that were unknown, 610 that died within those 23 minutes over Gillespie. 225 were identified by the APRC. The 85 individuals made that cut. About 2017, the work of our historians and anthropologists and dentists, we received the approval to begin exhuming all of the names associated with this event. In this one example, you see that the anthropologist has done an inventory. The anthropologist believes that everything that they saw was indicative of a single individual. DNA sample was taken. DNA samples you can see are designated by those who are coming from the card at the end. That card is adjacent to the bone, and that bone was sampled with DNA. Every one of those samples produced a DNA sequence, and they were all consistent with each other. That was confirmation to us that this is one individual. So not only will we able to say this is one individual, but we have the DNA reference for 74 other service members that were able to exclude evidence. It's different, didn't match their genetic relative. That leaves us with 11. You see the picture in the bottom, we are still working down to identify. Our dentists look at the mandible cover partially, not even completely, with no teeth present. But there is information present on tooth, the position for tooth number 20, lower right, kind of a premolar tooth. The socket is still intact. That tells you that that tooth was there and locked, had not been pulled, it wasn't locked, and the bone wasn't healing over. And so when you're looking at the record, then you see that on 220, that X, the red, those two, that individual, two different records for that one individual. He was excluded because he didn't have a dental record, said that that too was extracted by identity. So it can't be this guy. So that takes it from 11 down to 10. We're then looking at the anthropological bioprofile. We're able to tell this is a male European origin, 28 years old, who was relatively tall, between 5'8" and 6'2". And it was his stature of the remains that we had that were able to exclude 8 of the individuals of the 10 were all shorter than what we found. We narrowed down to those 2. Opportunity again presented itself when we had chest X-rays for those 2 individuals, and we were able to effectively exclude one, and we were also able to include on a positive match the other individual that left us with that single individual. And so it was a combination of the historical information, that control recovery, historical information from the historical record, biological record that enabled us to get an ID through the use of pathology, DNA, chest X-ray, and anthropology. The last thing we'll just jump through an update here on just kind of an overview that we should start on how we go about this massive mission of 80 clubhouse. We have realized in Lambert that the processing and recovery of information casework is best achieved through looking at large incidents of lots of USS Oklahoma was lost. We finished in 2021. All of these that you see on the list are now organized as a project. That means that each one of them has a project lead, and their job is focused almost entirely on that project. 40 hours a week, we were working, and then some. Each project has a team of individuals that are working the inventory, sampling, the mapping of the data that comes back from the lab. A lot of these projects have been complicated by the concept of needle, mixing the needling on the person to the lab. You have this concept, you see there's the cemetery and the grave, and you think of a coffin, and you have this mental image of a body in a coffin. A lot of times you're finding that that's not exactly the case. A lot of it has to do with the history, the post-recovery history of those things. They were made and originally recovered down in USS Oklahoma, capsized for 4 years. Salvage operations were taking place. The main was dark, couldn't see. There were bones that had to finally come up. They tried to identify them. They moved them around in the laboratory, and then there came a process of putting things together that couldn't be disproven rather than what we could prove. That led us to the excavation at the beginning of the project, ultimately in earnest in 2015, and one bundle that came out was believed to represent something that they knew how. Not only are they complicated by that commingling that takes place, but also the severe amount of fragmentation. We have cases that are jointly disinterments, as well as those that come from field operation. And the best that you can do is sort through that, identify what you can out for the individual. You can see the middle image, all of the blue tape, and this is one person who comes with 12 individuals represent one individual, and all of the other fragments that you know are human, but you're just never going to be able to sign up an individual to become part of the larger group. And with that, I will bring you to an end. And I will remind you again that this is only possible for a controlled recovery of data, whether that's the historical record, the archaeological record, the biological record, that enables us to be successful in what we're doing. It's the use of those multiple lines of evidence and the opportunity to be able to compare, to have the availability to compare the post-work data to the anti-work data that we may receive. And as we heard this morning, there's also the opportunity that presents itself that starts as a search for a trumpet that leads you to the question, what happened to heritage? And I think it's those kinds of opportunities that also exist, the contribution that each one of you make in your quest to find answers that we so desperately want. So with that, I will bring it to the end and yield the remainder of my comment to Dr. Carla Marshall at the end.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me here today. I am the Deputy Director of DNA Operations under the Armed Forces Medical Examiner System. And today I'm giving the briefing for DNA. It's typically a talk given by my boss, Tim McMahon. He can't be with us here today, so you have me instead. So just a quick overview of what I'll be talking about. The ACME's DNA operations, who we are, what we do, an introduction to DNA, fit for use tests, and then the future technologies that we're working with. So we are a branch of, we are the Armed Forces DNA Identification Laboratory under the Armed Forces Medical Examiner System, which is a part of the Defense Health Agency. So we are under a different branch of the government than DPAA, but we work very closely with them. And we are the DPAA's only human remains DNA testing laboratory. Our lab was established in 1990, and that was to utilize DNA methods to identify the remains of U.S. service members. We are an accredited DNA laboratory. In fact, we just underwent our biannual audit a couple of weeks ago. And we are accredited to 2 different sets of standards. So both ISO or international standards, as well as forensic standards for the FBI's quality assurance standards. So we're an accredited laboratory, and that dictates what we do and the quality of our methods and procedures. We not only support the past accounting mission, as we're talking about today, we also do present day accounting, DNA tests for service members killed in action today. We also have the Family Reference Sample, or FRS database. And some of you will be contributing to that, hopefully. And we do also some worldwide support. We assisted with the Israeli Defense Forces, the Maui wildfires, and we also do some other challenging cases because we do specialize in very refined techniques, more advanced techniques than most forensic labs. When you think about forensic DNA as a field, it really started in criminal forensics. And then those questions in criminal forensics are different than the ones that we're trying to answer in human remains identification. So in those cases, we're asking which person in the greater population, the world's population, could have committed a crime. So our statistics need to be as robust as saying this one person out of 9 billion, 8 billion is definitely the one who committed the crime. In human remains identification, it's typically a smaller closed population. So we might know if, say, DPA finds a helicopter that there were perhaps 6 individuals on board. So we're looking for 1 in 6 as opposed to 1 in 8 million in many cases. So our optimal methods for DNA testing include not only nuclear DNA, this is the DNA that your typical crime lab will utilize, but we also look at mitochondrial DNA. And there are very few labs in the US that specialize in mitochondrial DNA. FBI being one, California Department of Justice, New York OCME uses mitochondrial DNA to identify 9/11 victims still today. And this requires, mitochondrial DNA requires comparison to a living family reference donor, similar to Y chromosome STR typing. So I'm sure one of the questions that you might have is, why does DNA testing take time? Well, we are using those accreditation standards. So we have to go through validation tests. We make sure all of our reagents are quality controlled. Everything that comes in the building has to be tested, even if it came from a forensic assay manufacturer. Our methods are so sensitive that we can pick up very trace amounts of contaminants that manufacturers sometimes overlook. So we have very clean reagents. We authenticate all of our sequence and our DNA results. We go through, we get a DNA result from a sample, from a bone sample. We go through it again and do it a second time. So every time we give, an answer to DPAA, this is the mitochondrial DNA sequence for this remains, we've done it twice. We've confirmed those results. It's very important. We also operate as a giant ancient DNA laboratory. So those forensic tests, we do them, but when they fail, we have to be prepared to have more sensitive methods. So we do specialized testing that's not done in other laboratories in the world. We're a leader in this field. So we develop our own assays and our own workflows in the lab. And then we also have family references. Sometimes it takes time. We might get a result from the bone sample, but there might not be a match in the family reference sample database. So that's why we work closely with DPAA and service casualty officers, so that they can find an appropriate reference for a sample that we might be able to match. When we're thinking about the human genome, you're pretty familiar with that, the nuclear DNA genome. It's a roughly 3.2 billion base pairs of DNA. In each cell, you have a single copy of the diploid genome. But then in each cell, you have many, many copies of mitochondrial DNA. So there are hundreds of mitochondria within each cell, and every mitochondrion can have multiple copies of mitochondrial DNA. So let's say we have one copy of nuclear DNA, we might have 1,000 of mitochondrial DNA. So that is the primary reason, just copy number alone, that mitochondrial DNA is very successful when working with degraded remains. The odds of getting mitochondrial DNA are just simply higher. We also do typical, like I said, criminal forensic DNA testing. This is autosomal nuclear DNA testing. This is not sex chromosomes, but chromosomes 1 through 22. There are POTUS markers, STR markers on all of those chromosomes, and we do amplified tests and do those as well. In addition to the nuclear autosomal DNA testing, we do Y chromosomal STR testing. These are 16, 17 loci on the Y chromosome that we can use to compare missing individuals to their paternal relative. So a brother or a paternal nephew, for example. But we have all of the major forensic DNA crime laboratory kits online, validated for use at ACTA. Everything a typical crime lab can do, we do that everything. And we, so I think it's important to note that in addition to autosomal DNA, the mitochondrial DNA and YSTR testing that we do requires specific relatives for comparison. So as a woman passes on her mitochondrial DNA to her children. So both of my two kids have the same mitochondrial DNA as I do. They have different mitochondrial DNA than my husband. He happens to have a closely related mitochondrial DNA lineage to mine, but it is different. So it's passed from the mother's line. Y chromosomal DNA is just the opposite. It passes through the paternal line of descent. So for these typical forensic nuclear DNA tests, those the 27 STR loci on the autosomes. So we are looking for very close nuclear family members for the short chain repeat DNA comparisons. This would be like your nuclear family members that work best for those types of relationships. So when we think about inheritance, each of our children get 50% of the DNA from their mother, 50% from the father, and then a grandchild, a quarter from each grandparent, and so on and so forth. So the closer you are related to a missing loved one, the more DNA you would share with them, and the better reference would be for that individual.
Right.
So here's just another example of that information showing how much DNA sharing is within family members, and distant family members still share DNA. So we can work with relatives using mitochondrial DNA and Y chromosomal DNA. It's inherited without recombination to very distant degrees of relationship. But for autosomal markers, the closer, the better. If we want to look at the number of DNA tests that we report each calendar year or fiscal year, on the left, you can see that mitochondrial DNA testing, standard mitochondrial DNA analysis, was the majority of what we reported in fiscal year 2018. That is the green column. And over time, the traditional mitochondrial DNA analysis has reduced in the yellow, or our next generation sequencing, or very, very sensitive mitochondrial DNA testing has been more needed by the samples. They're more challenging. We're getting more difficult samples into the lab. And this is because of the disinterred remains largely that have very degraded and damaged DNA. But also in this, you can see that we do mitochondrial DNA standard, we do autosomal STR typing, we do bi-STR typing, and we do next generation sequencing. So we run the gamut of all those tests. Here's some metrics for you about the DNA reports that we write. So believed to be reports, these are our identification reports. In 2023, we wrote 175 new DNA identification reports for DPAA. Addendum reports, those are reports for remains where the person has already been identified. So sometimes we get additional portions of the remains, and those we report to DPAA as well. So even though we got a DNA sequence or a DNA result, it matches someone who was already identified, and DPAA handles those. We also have remains of foreign nationals. So within the punch bowl, not only are missing Americans, but there are others from, Japan, Korea as well that are buried in the punch bowl. And we know that because we test the DNA, and the ancestry is Asian for some of the haplogroups, and it also doesn't match anyone in our family reference sample database. So this just gives you a picture of the work that we do in DNA doesn't always lead to a new identification. We would love for that to be the case. Sometimes it's not one of our guys, and sometimes it's someone that we've already identified. So this I already hinted at, but the reason that we lead with mitochondrial DNA analysis is because of sample qualities. When you have degraded skeletal remains, they have all sorts of challenges. So if you leave a skeleton, if the remains are out in the environment for a long period of time, there's not only human DNA that's been degraded and damaged, but you also get bacterial DNA, fungal DNA, anything from that environment is on the remains, and we extract that just alongside the human DNA. So the odds of us getting anything, any result, are better if we use mitochondrial DNA as our leading method. And then also mitochondrial DNA is complemented by autosomal STR and Y-STR typing. That is to increase the statistical significance for an identification. So over the past, since we started in the 1990s, there's been a constant improvement in technology undergoing an active. So we improved our DNA extraction methods. We overhauled that in the early 2000s, where we can completely demineralize bone to get every last bit of DNA in there. And in the past few years, we validated the Dabney DNA extraction protocol. And this allows us to get the very, very, very smallest DNA fragments that are only 35 base pairs for sequencing. So we're constantly improving our techniques as we go. So thinking about the future, for disinterment projects, for example, remains are disinterred, and we want to look at what we can do to have better success or challenges to DNA profiling, including chemical treatment of remains, like formaldehyde, involving common mitochondrial DNA sequences, where two unrelated individuals have the same mitochondrial DNA profile. So we want to know what we can do to separate those. And also cases where there are no references for those typical forensic methods of autosomal STRs, YSTRs, and mitochondrial DNA. So we're looking forward and preparing for those situations. Many of you might be familiar with the Punch Bowl Cemetery in Hawaii. And the Punch Bowl, many of the remains from the Korean War were taken to Kokura, where identifications were made, but there were a large number of unknowns that were processed in the Kokura mortuary. These remains were embalmed in vats of formaldehyde for 3 to 5 days at high heat, and this is 40 to 50% formaldehyde. So what formaldehyde does is it cross-links DNA to protein. So it almost permanently attaches the DNA to protein. And that is one of the worst things you could do for DNA preservation, fortunately. So we in 2016 validated NGS, or next generation sequencing method, so that we can recover the remaining, fragments of cross-linked DNA from these remains that were involved in Kokura. This was a long project. So the success rate using the old methods was 6%, and now it's more like 60% for 70% success rate. So when we're thinking about DNA degradation, it's just simply making smaller and smaller fragments of DNA. And there is a lower limit. So the upper limit, let's say your largest STR forensic marker is 500 base pairs. The smallest one being 80 base pairs. The DNA that we see from the Kokura unknowns is 50 base pairs on average. 20 is the minimum that we can even use for any type of sequencing method. Once you're at 20 base pairs, it could be DNA from a human, it could be DNA from a bacterium, it could be DNA from a dog, and we wouldn't be able to tell the difference because it's not long enough for us to distinguish whether this is a human piece of DNA or not. So the degradation in the disinterred remains is very severe. And this is roughly 50 to say 70 base pairs on average. And what that means is that we can't use our standard forensic techniques of PCR amplification for targeting them. Instead, we use what we call a hybridization capture method. Hybridization capture is the method that is used for a lot of different things. If anyone's had exome sequencing, for example, your DNA has undergone hybridization capture. Ancient DNA uses hybridization capture to recover targets. And what we're doing is that we're changing the proportion of DNA in the extract, and then we put it through whole genome sequencing. So the capture, let's say we extract DNA from a femoral bone, a femur. There's DNA from bacteria, fungus, and then very small bits of DNA from the person that remains. We're going to use the capture process to fish out the human DNA amongst the background of everything else. We want to lower that signal of everything else. And we're going to do this with a capture procedure using baits. It's kind of like fishing. So we get, baits that are specific to what we want. In this case, it's human DNA. Envision this, jar of jelly beans. And if you like licorice ones like my family does, the black ones, then you're going to put in baits specific to, to pick out those. So that's kind of what we do with our capture method. We're putting in baits specific to human mitochondrial DNA and fishing that out. We have shown through a collaboration with the top ancient DNA laboratory in the world, the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology. We took our DNA samples, actually bone samples. We took bone samples over there, compared them to Neanderthal remains that are tens of thousands of years old. If you look at this graph that's in purple, our DPAA punch bowl cases. And then the green is Neanderthals and Denisovans. And what we found is that the DNA is similar quality. So we really are working with ancient DNA quality samples here. That's why we have such specialized methods. We learned from the Max Planck Institute about the Dabney method, how to retain those extremely small fragments of DNA. And it has to do with buffer ratio. So we put in more of a buffer than we would have if we were following forensic protocol. But that allows us to retain the very, very, very small fragments, the M&Ms in this particular example from Tim. Looking across projects, so we have Korea Punch Bowl on the left. We have the Tokyo prison fire on the right. Every different conflict or context from DPAA has its own particular success rate. Unfortunately, Southeast Asia is a lower success rate so far for 2024. And that could be, I'm not sure how many samples that is out, doesn't show the total. There's very acidic soil in the Southeast Asia conflict, so oftentimes the bone is disintegrated quite a bit. There are also non-human remains that we get, and we test the DNA and it turns out to be wild boar or something that's non-human. Then we have actually quite great success with the Tokyo prison fire. So about 50% of the samples that we've tested to date have yielded DNA sequences. So that's very promising, despite the burned condition of those. Yeah. Yeah. And then you'll see, so we do our best to, devote our resources to all the conflicts to bring answers. Our NGS success rate, we can only do so much. If there's no human DNA there, there's nothing we can do. We have maximized our potential. And we have shown that not even the best ancient DNA lab in the world, Max Planck, could do better than we do. Our data and our results are comparable to theirs. Our percent success rate for NGS, the forest quality samples, is 60%. So that's for a sample success. But, looking across an entire skeleton, maybe this bone, the leg bone didn't work, but a tooth will work. So our case success rate is more like 100%. We just might not be able to get a result in every single sample, but in every individual, we have much higher success. We wrote 1,100 DNA comparison reports in 2023 and 394, this is with NGS overall. With NGS overall, since we started, 1,100 DNA comparison reports, 394 first-time name reports. So that is 394 identifications came out of these very, very sensitive methods, the hybridization capture methods. And we're increasing our processing capacity by getting higher throughput instruments, automation, and increasing staff towards these efforts. So there are some challenges with common mitochondrial DNA sequences and no STR references. So what if these typical methods lead to no viable FRS? We can also make use of nieces and nephews. So here's an example where an individual had 2 nieces and a nephew, and STR profiling was able to lead to an identification. So if we had one brother, for example, that amount of DNA sharing would be similar to these 3, nieces and nephews. But even if we don't always have a very close relative, we can still get autosomal STR typing information that can lead to an identification. And in this particular case, combining those autosomal STR results with mitochondrial DNA it increased the statistic from 13,000 times more likely to be this individual to 2.68 times more likely to be this individual than a random person relation. So the closer the relationship, or sorry, the more distant the relationship, the more family members we need for DNA references. Okay, and the last thing that I'm going to touch on is emerging technology, investigative genetic genealogy, IgG or FIG, as well as SNP analysis. Genetic genealogy can answer questions such as who am I related to? So there are many individuals who might be adopted, who are looking for their family members, and they can do DNA testing through Ancestry.com or Family Tree DNA 23andMe to help them find potential relatives by searching publicly available DNA databases. Can also ask, what medical conditions or what am I susceptible to genetically? What's my ancestry or heritage? But these broad scale genomic DNA tests can also help with missing persons and cold cases. So the Golden State Killer was identified through IgG, and many missing persons or unidentified human remains are now being identified on a daily basis by using these new techniques. So IgG or FIG, it provides an investigative lead. It can tell you who your relative is, and you might be 6 or 7 degrees removed from that individual. And it can say, this is a likely relative of this person, but it is an investigative technique. It is not an accredited method of DNA identification. So once you have that lead, that investigative lead, you need to still do your standard forensic STR profiling. It's still done in the background to confirm that investigative lead. So these methods, they're in the news, they're being used for criminal forensics missing persons casework. And unfortunately, these methods, for the most part, require a lot more DNA than we have from the very challenging DPAA samples. In fact, Offram, which is one of the major companies that has, performs this DNA testing, they don't always, sometimes they don't even get enough DNA quantity in order to pursue with IgG. And we don't get a choice. If we get a DNA sample, it might not have the ideal DNA quantity, but we still have to try to pursue, the SNP profile. We are in the midst of validating a method for DNA identification, not investigative leads, but a DNA identification from SNPs. So we have done all of the lab work. We are now analyzing the results, and this will allow us to increase or expand the pool of family reference sample donors. So paternal niece, for example. So a woman, let's say it's missing service member's sister's daughter. Missing service member's brother's daughter, paternal niece, using mitochondrial DNA and YSTR would not be a viable reference because that paternal niece doesn't share mitochondrial DNA and she doesn't have the Y chromosome. But using SNPs, that type of a relative would be an excellent donor for SNP analysis. So it's a nuclear DNA identification that's amenable to very, very degraded DNA samples. So we are extremely excited to bring this online, and it should be in use by, the beginning of FY25, so in the fall this year. And I'm spearheading that project, and I can tell you that it is moving along very well. We're very pleased with the results. So to give you an example, I showed you the STR typing results can give what we call a likelihood ratio or a statistic of 2.68 million times more likely to be that individual. Well, with our 95,000 SNP assay that we're developing, we have much higher confidence in our results, and the statistics are much more robust. So yellow being parent offspring, orange being full sibling, green second degree relationship. What we have found, for example, is highlighted in the red box. We have a third degree relationship, a first cousin, or a half niece, half nephew. We have a relationship like that, just that one family reference sample donor. We can compare the DNA, and it is 2 times 10 to the 54th times more likely to be that individual. So these statistics are astronomical, and they go up from there to the 1700s, 10 to the 1700. So it's literally to the moon and back. That, you know, it is no one in this, you know, in our solar system could be, it has to be that kind. So we are working very diligently to finish this method so that we can offer it and lead to more identifications and more closure for involved. So in closing, we have a team of over 100 DNA scientists on Dover Air Force Base at the DNA lab, working their tails off every day, doing what we can to get results using the most, you know, forward-thinking methods for you all, so we can help bring more service members home. So we are very dedicated, and please, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask me. I'm here to help. There's a picture of our second floor. We're on the second floor of the building. It's our lab, and yeah, that is all for me. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Dr. Marshall. Before we get into the Q&A session, we have one speaker, and he's going to speak about partnerships and our innovation. Our very own PPA, Sir Justin, but ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be here with you today. And before I start, I'd just like to say thank you for your efforts to keep the memory alive of your loved ones and to instill those memories in other generations as well. As Mark said, I'm from the Partnerships and Innovation Director of the Defense POW and Miami Agency. My name is Justin Budd, and I'm a Partner Relations Officer for the Directorate. This is my second time with the agency. I retired in 2018 from the Army, but the DPAA was my last assignment before retirement, where I served as the Director for Plans and Partnership for the Europe Mediterranean area. So it's really a privilege to be back with the agency again and to be able to help in this mission. So today I'm excited to share with you ways that DPAA is using partnerships to fulfill its mission of accounting for service members and providing answers to you, the families. I'm happy to share that last year, we were able to celebrate the 200th partner mission of DPAA and its innovative use of partnerships. Shown here is one of these missions, which was the deepest underwater investigation and recovery activity DPAA has undertaken to date. The agency partnered with 2 world-class organizations who conducted technical dive operations to excavate the site of a possible World War II crash located in 295 feet of water in the Adriatic Sea. This is just one of the ways that DPAA is committed to partnering and innovating with the best in the world to advance the mission quickly, effectively, and efficiently as possible. Oh, sorry. There we go. Sorry about that. Our ability to leverage partnerships is, in and of itself, an innovation. EPA has dedicated a team to develop and harness partnerships in various aspects of our mission. These are some examples of partner field work, but there are also many other ways we work with partners. In addition to archaeological field work, EPA has partnership programs that are focused on strategic development, research initiatives, and innovation studies. Throughout this presentation, I will share with you the ways EPA leverages partnerships to achieve its goals. Our partner development program identifies, cultivates, and maintains partnerships that complements EPA's research, field, and innovation capabilities and capacity. This approach ensures we work with qualified entities that meet the needs established by the agency and enable us to tap into external resources, expertise, and cutting-edge technologies that complement ongoing agency efforts. Additionally, we engage in extensive collaboration on each project to align capabilities of each partner with EPA requirements, which includes consideration of geography, equipment, technology, expertise, and other resources. Through the Partnerships and Innovations Directorate, EPA collaborates with more than 120 active and developing partners across the country and the world. And you see that here, the different countries and states that we partner with are illustrated in this slide. One example of a highly successful domestic partnership network we've established to expand research efforts is the Hub and Spoke program. This innovative partnership initiative is a network of 16 universities and educational institutions that house postdoctoral fellows from a variety of academic backgrounds and with a broad range of expertise. This program brings additional benefits to the mission by utilizing each institution's resources, including historical archives and libraries, geospatial expertise, and innovative technology. Research is foundational to EPA operations, supporting various aspects of the accounting mission, including family events like this one. In careful coordination with our expert internal staff, partners conduct, among other things, foundational research to support EPA's fieldwork, disinterment, and identification efforts. Last year, we partnered with 18 organizations on 81 research projects, many of which are long-term complex efforts. Research is often interdisciplinary, and the network is continually evolving, making it more likely that we can answer the toughest questions in advance of more cases. Each research initiative is a step toward providing closure and honoring the sacrifice of those who have served our nation. Terrestrial archaeological partners collaborate with EPA to conduct land-based operations around the world. In 2023, partners conducted 46 missions in 16 different countries. And these photos showcase the diverse environments and techniques employed by field partners during investigations and recoveries conducted for the EPA. Photo 1 there in the top left is the history flight that excavated the site of the mass grave in Tarawa. Photo number 2, top right, is the Geoscope Services team wet screening for evidence in soil excavated from a site in France. Picture number 3, the lower left-hand corner, is the Golden West Humanitarian Foundation and their team screening excavated material and local workers building a coffer dam at a Vietnam era site in Cambodia. Number 4, bottom middle, it shows the members of multilateral partner effort conducting test pit excavations, screening soil, and conducting metal detector surveys in search for possible evidence of a recovery site in the United Kingdom. And finally, in the lower right-hand corner is the University of Illinois Chicago investigation team as it crosses a river along the path to a possible World War II aircraft crash site in the Philippines. Similar to our terrestrial archaeological partners, underwater archaeology partners work with EPAA to conduct underwater operations worldwide as well. In 2023, partners conducted 24 underwater missions in 17 countries. And as you can see here, the requirements of underwater archaeology necessitate additional training and tools to provide opportunities for innovation. In the first picture in the top left, members of Task Force Dagger Foundation provide a safety brief in preparation for diving during investigation and survey operations in Australia. In the top middle picture, EPAA partnered with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and Orca Maritime to survey a large area using autonomous underwater remotely operated vehicles to conduct dives in Alaska. Top right picture, there's a hard hat diver that's performing dredge and dive operations during the Project Recover-led underwater excavation of crash site Blau. The bottom left picture shows results of the partners' work collecting witness statements and conducting remote sensing and diving operations to locate a World War II era site in the Philippines. And finally, the bottom right picture there is a picture of a mission in which EPAA partnered with the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, the National Park Service, and Lund University to perform underwater recovery of the Tulsa American, a B-24 in deep water off the coast of Croatia. Of note, this particular recovery was the subject of a PBS and NOVA special called the Last Week 24, and the operation resulted in the recovery and identification of First Lieutenant Eugene P. Ford. As you see, EPAA partners with many organizations to employ a variety of techniques to support our mission. As previously mentioned, EPAA's use of partnerships is an innovation itself. However, innovation as a concept is not new to EPAA, and agency personnel have been engaged in it for many years. To support the strategic and collaborative pursuit of innovation, EPAA has recently established a program for agency personnel and partners to evaluate and validate innovative field laboratory and research methods. The displayed examples here are current studies showing technologies and procedures that may not be validated, but someday be used for agency use. In photo number 1, which is that bottom left corner, divers are collecting 7 samples around a wreck site for an underwater innovation study. In photo number 2, that top left pair of photos actually, is a study on pair matching methods based on comparison of 3D images. Number 3, top right, is a photo of scientists working on isoscape studies mentioned by Dr. Franklin. And number 4 shows a 3D model of a wreck site captured from a remotely operated vehicle. Next, we'll view a video that takes a look at a dual innovation and underwater initiative conducted in partnership with 2 organizations. The video you're about to see is from a 2-day underwater innovation study of an investigation off the coast of Hawaii. EPAA collaborated with the Ocean Exploration Trust and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration to detect potential anomalies located on the sea floor. Since the site is too feet for humans, the team used 2 remotely operated vehicles from Ocean Exploration Trust fleet for the investigation.
Technical response. 10 meters, like on that. That's significant. Just approaching the large target now. So interesting. Because that's.
Yes.
That's like the main language.
Yeah.
Sites like this tell a story. It's the location of a tragedy, very likely a spot where service members lost their lives.
I think a lot of the cost part of it is the reflection of that lights.
Yeah.
Service members lost in conflict and combat leave behind friends, families, and all too often, a mystery of their last resting place. Over 31,000 Americans are presumed lost at sea all around the world. This mission is in partnership with an organization called Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency, or DPAA, a division of the Department of Defense charged with providing the fullest possible accounting for military personnel lost while performing their duties.
Ours is our reality, but the main task here is to evaluate this site for possible loss of 2 people on board. That means we're providing a number of aspects to understand this site.
Partnering with organizations like the Ocean Exploration Trust provides the DPAA a unique avenue to explore deep water areas. DB Nautilus is equipped with advanced technologies to fulfill this mission, including remotely operated vehicles, acoustic mapping sonars, and telepresence capabilities that allow scientists to participate in the mission from anywhere in the world. For this mission, we're working on a site located more than 1,800 feet deep. We're using acoustic sonar and remotely operated vehicles to investigate the site in an effort to correlate information about the wreck and
But I think click on it, keep it going.
Ten meters, slightly off that.
that's significant.
Just approaching the large target now.
I think for the most part, you got the point of the innovation. That's obviously an extremely deep water site. And we as an agency don't currently have the capability to investigate a site like that. And that's why we partnered with these external entities to conduct this investigation. And the investigation actually resulted in the collection of aircraft parts and data plates that may help correlate the aircraft. The team also tested some other potential uses, including the future use of the technique on excavations that won't disturb the site and or its integrity. So this is just one of the examples of how DPAA leverages the skills, resources, and expertise of our professional partners to support the county mission. So in closing, I just want to share that DPAA is committed to expanding capabilities and capacity through partnerships, all with the goal of accounting for your loved ones. Our partners also share this dedication through the work they do supporting the DPAA mission. And ultimately, it's about providing answers to you as the families and to the nation and bringing our lost service members home. Thank you for your time today, and I look forward to any questions you may have. We'll be here the remainder of the day and until they can come. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. I'm gonna ask all presenters for this morning to come on back up. And do our Q&A session. As they come back up, just a reminder, we're gonna have folks are full of with the mics. So if you have a question, please raise your hand. I know we're kind of running behind the schedule. I see some hands up. And just a reminder, if you have a question, case specific about your loved one, please save those for your time. Service casualty officer. This Q&A session is for the presenters that we had earlier this month.
Yeah, turn it on, sorry.
This question is for Dr. Marshall again. I'm a family member of the Billings prison. Remains, and you mentioned I have to report back to my family after today, so I want to make sure this is right. You mentioned that there were 50% of the samples that you have tested match DNA or DNA. Is that right?
So actually, I think at the time that a recent presentation internally at ACTA was put together, there were 90 samples that had been tested. 45 of those gave DNA results, so almost exactly 50%. And that's with the next generation sequencing methods. So these require the more sensitive methods, but it's about 50%. So we're very happy with that.
Hi. My question more is like on the partnering. I know the problem with trying to get samples, we're trying to get as many folks to the samples. But if you talk about partnering with Ancestry.com and all the other commercial entities that people are putting in their samples, can you access that to make comparisons for DNA?
So I'll start to answer that question and then turn it over to the others. The agency actually has partnered with organizations like that to do genealogical work to help advance that FRS, effort. Where it goes from there, I'm not certain, but
So as I mentioned in my talk, the first thing that we're doing is that developing that 95,000 SNP panel for that DNA identification, that accredited forensic method. Once that's in place, then yes, we can move on to these whole genome sequencing shotgun approaches where we get a DNA sample from the human remains. We get a whole genome sequence, and then we could use that profile to search these databases, find a lead perhaps, and then we would go back and do our 95 as the identification. So yes, that's the next step.
Online questions?
we do have online questions. The first one is from Marcus Witt. And Marcus, are there any new developments on the progress of the fifth phase 7-year plan at Huntsville, Hawaii? How many remains will have?
Thank you for the question. So we are in phase 5 of phase 7. So there were 800 unknowns buried in the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific, which you will refer to as a punch bowl. It's because it's an old crater, so it looks like a punch bowl. Yeah, in there. Numbers wise, I have to get the exact numbers where you are. So we should finish phase 5 by the end of this fiscal year. And then we'll start phase 6, basically get all the remains into the lab process and it will start phase 6 sometime in fiscal year 25.
Our next question is, our next question is from Maggie Lynch Sterling. Maggie asks, will there be any updates on the efforts being made from the World War II aircraft found Adriatic near the island this? So I'm not sure which aircraft that she's referring to, but the work on the Tulsa American is complete. As far as I know, there was another aircraft in the vicinity, which was a B-17. And I don't know where we stand on that particular project, so I have to do a little work to get back. It doesn't. Our next question, our last question from our online audience is from Vicky Mora. Vicky asks, after a family member has submitted their DNA sample, over, how long does it take to process the system?
That's a good question. So the sample processing starts immediately. So we have a queue, depending on the type of relative that it is. So for mitochondrial DNA, and we work in batches of 96. So the mitochondrial DNA plate, once it fills up to 96, that'll move forward. Autosomal STR and YSTR. So the process can take anywhere from a couple weeks to a month, and then the family reference samples in the DNA database for searching.
Thank you. We've already all my questions. Do you have any questions in the room? Okay, well, let's go ahead and get our round of applause to our presenter.
So I'm going to answer the questions that were asked during the remembrance ceremony. So one was a question about stored remains from Vietnam. So the last evidence we have, the Vietnamese told us that they turned over remains that were stored was in 1990. The predecessor organization did a report in 1999 and dove into that to determine whether or not that was still a practice. We do not have any credible evidence that is an ongoing practice. You think about it back in the end of the war in the 70s, 80s, there was a lot of distrust, uncertainty, challenges, things that the North Vietnamese government agreed to in the Paris Peace Accords was one of the agreements was to turn over remains. So practically speaking, it wasn't surprising that they had some remains in storage as they started that process post Vietnam War to turn over those remains. So I just want to address that question, and see Mr. Adams is not in the room because he's in this case summary update, and I provided that response to them. But for the group, I wanted to make sure that you heard that answer as well. Yeah, one more question. I can't remember what it was now. All right. Have we had any remains? Thank you very much. Have we had any remains turned over from Russia or China relative to the Vietnam War? The answer is no. I talked to some of our analysts to see if we have had any, but we do have it's called the U.S. RJC, the U.S. Russia Joint Commission, and it's the Joint Commission Support Division. I think I got that right, GCSD. So they work extensively on Cold War cases and Vietnam War cases relative to anything that may have occurred in Russia. As I mentioned, China is a place where we have losses from all three conflicts. The interest in getting back in there is really important to us, right? And it's all about developing relationships that have not been done for a while. Our challenge in Russia, you might imagine, is the things going on in Ukraine right now. So we have historically had two archivists working in the archives in Russia that expired. We just continue to work on regaining access. But you can imagine geopolitical challenges that we face for access in places like Russia, China, North Korea, as an example. It does not mean that there are not ongoing efforts, at the highest level. Even when we go to China, it goes all the way up to the highest levels of the Office of Secretary of Defense to do we call it defense contact proposal. Which we have to lay out all the things we're going to be doing, to get approval to do that. And we've had a lot of success this year, doing that. So, right, when we make ground in those areas, we're going to work hard to continue that. Thank you for reminding me of that question. Hopefully that answered the questions. I just wanted to hit that with the group because I know it was asked. I just didn't want to disrupt the flow of the rumors or anything. So I wanted that to be the focus, and talk about these in the Q&A. So thank you very much, Mark.
All right, one last round of applause. We'll be back this afternoon for our final Q&A session. Another question. Before we break for lunch, just a reminder that lunch is now till 2 p.m. We will come back at 2. This ballroom will be our world board. My right will be the green gold board at the ballroom, and in the across the hall as the bathroom. And you'll be in your breakout sessions from 2 to 3:05. And then take a little break. And by 3:20, if you don't mind, come back here to this room and have our another final Q&A session. We'll have our another Q&A session. And we will close it out from our operations from that background. Any questions before we all break? No? All right, thank you, everyone. Enjoy your lunch.
Yeah, so but they, yeah, we can get stuff on very deep. Yeah. The worst. So yeah, so it was the last week. Those were based.
Thank you for your help on that.
I'll let you speak to it.
So I think she probably did. Thanks for that
I
information.
apologize, we're having issues with the website right now.
That's okay. She can get it. She's on Facebook. Her sister is. So yeah, I'm sure you can get it. Yeah.